Sword of Coming Chapter 1001. There are 10 heroes and 4 candidates in the ancient world, and 2 of them are here now, Li Xing and Mr. Xianxia. According to the realm, the cultivation base is cost-effective, and it should be divided into 3 grades. Of course, the first grade is Li Xing, Mr. Xianxia, Xing Juzhong, and the 3 monks are all 14. Then there are Zhou Xian, Lu Yan by Jing Xiaomo who have not yet joined the 14 realms. In the end, of course, Qin Pingon, who was not even in the 5 realms for the time being. Only Li Xixing has a special identity, and it is extremely difficult to accurately define his true realm of cultivation. If it is only based on the Taoist age, it should be Mr. Sanxian Xiaomo by Jing Lixing, Yu Xian, Lu Yan, Jing Juzhong, Li Xixing, and Qin Pingon. But today's Li Xixing, the future headmaster of Baiyijing Koming, and Beidasheng Jing Juzhong Chunyang Lu Yan, in the eyes of the most holy masters, all have the hope of being among the top 10 in the future. So no matter how you calculate it, Qin Pingon is the one at the bottom. It's just that he is young, but he has seen a lot of big scenes. Qin Pingon is not at a loss. With a heart like water, he can do whatever he needs to do. When Qin Pingon followed Jing Zhuzhong's reminder, he put away the thoughts of different sizes. The Qin Pingon, who was copying several Taoist books on the first floor of his own downcast mangosteen, instantly became dull, and he kept his pen-lifting posture for a long time. In the general station of Dalizu, a monk's figure used the method of escaping the earth. In the secluded place in the remote mountains, he found a cave between the gaps in the stone walls. His figure instantly resembled a cicada shedding, which was actually a substitute talisman. A middle-aged Taoist priest who set up a stall for fortune-telling and helped to write family letters has been earning money here for some time, especially helping to check the marriage between men and women. The matter was quite effective. The wandering Taoist liked to drink, so he took a few gulps from the wine gourd, and suddenly his head slammed on the table and he fell asleep. A Qi practitioner from a foreign country who was enjoying the scenery in a Xianxia inn in Qingxing country immediately returned to his room, closed the door, sat cross-legged on the futon, folded his hands on his abdomen and fell asleep. In the realm of Xingyang Mountain last year, there was a Qi trainer who did not record the genealogy of the peaks. He relied on the cultivation of the 3 realms and all the way to get in touch with wealth. He just became a guest of a certain peak sect. When there is a gap, I sit by the river to fish, and when a fish bites the bait, I don't mention the rod. Qin Pingon was a little embarrassed and hesitant, but he was not reluctant, but it was not easy to do it. Just not waiting for Qin Pingon to ask, Jing Juzhong obviously figured out something, so he laughed again. You don't need to recall this peace of mind, otherwise you will give up halfway, and it is easy to hurt the root of the Tao if you are not careful. The current you don't say anything. I can just withdraw from the outside world and return to the village school to recuperate. Besides, I don't want to be resented by that existence and then be blocked by Wen Sheng and scolded in the streets. Lu Yan smiled and said, Fellow Daoist Qin, I never thought we would meet so soon. Qin Pingon clasped his fists in return. I have seen Senior Chunyang. After that, not daring to delay, Qin Pingon immediately sacrificed 2 flying swords of his life, covering all the monks except Li Xing and Mr. Sanxian. According to Qin Pingon's rough estimation, they were at least millions of miles away from the sacred image, and with the current nascent soul realm, they could at most support a small world of birds in a cage covering 1,000 miles of jurisdiction. A scrawny old man with beard and hair like snow, wearing a very loose purple robe, hanging barefoot in the void realm. The purple robe on the old man's body is called purple qi, the feather coat on Yudo's body, the 7 lights of the Dragon Tiger Mountain Celestial Master Zhao Tianlai, also known as the Lord of the Law, and the ink-colored dragon robe of Yang Ji. It is one of the top 10 robes in the world. This purple qi robe is painted with a black and white yin and yang fish. There is a crystal-clear gourd hanging from the waist of the old man, and you can clearly see the magnificent inside. Elephant. The starlight is dazzling and countless stars are clustered and gathered into a river, just like the entire Milky Way in the sky has been copied. The old man, who was supposed to be in the 14th realm of Taoism in the outer world, Fulu Yushuan, was praised by the world as the word Fulu, that monopolized the world. Yu Xian flicked his fingers a few times, and there were ripples of spiritual energy at the boundaries of several heavens and earth. He nodded with an expression of admiration in his eyes and said with a smile, Not bad, good Qin Yingguan. After talking about the scene, Yu Xian really has some doubts in his heart. After all, the young hidden official today is not the Qin Pingon who borrowed the 14th Daoist law from Lu Chen. In fact, a pure martial artist, even if he is in the limit after all, is a cultivator who is only nascent soul. How can he help? What is the significance of creating a world of 1,000 miles with flying swords now? Therefore Zhou Xian couldn't help asking Lu Yen in his heart, fellow Daoist Chunyang, that's all? In fact, the old man and the Taoist priest who was said to have returned to Haoran from the Qingming world not long ago, were the first to meet Zhou Xian. Lu Yen smiled and said, "Senior, you just wait and see." Zhou Xian had to press his doubts down and nodded. Building a small world formation is not a trivial matter for these cultivators. Of course, speaking of conscience, the tenacity of this small world is still beyond Xian's expectations. Leaving aside those big talismans that press the bottom of the box, even if Zhou Xian made his own shots, it is estimated that there are not more than 20 attacks. Talisman, it is not necessarily able to break the barrier of heaven and earth. The annoying thing about Xianxia, in addition to Xianxia's sword breaking all methods, is especially the strange magical powers of these flying swords. Shouldn't Wen Sheng and Li Xing discuss with each other, hoping to help closed disciples add a piece to the merit book of the Confucian Temple? If it was someone else, Zhou Xian would still worry about whether he would use the heart of a villain to control the belly of a gentleman, but if he could be replaced by an old scholar, Zhou Xian felt that he would not feel wronged by the other party. I am afraid that even if he confronted the old scholar face to face, it would be nothing more than giving up. In a word, so what? If you are not convinced, you come and hit me. Qin Pingon said, I urge you to let go of your spiritual sense a little bit, and visualize where your own Taoist place is usually used to practice qi. Jing Juzhong was the first to visualize a white emperor city Liuli Pavilion. Lu Yen then visualized the Lvgong Temple near the Fent Temple in Mengliang Kingdom. Yu Xuanguan came up with a gold-filled peak where the authentic mountain gate is located. Xiaomo's visualization of the dojo is relatively perfunctory. It is a thatched hut in Luobeatin Bixiao Cave, where the wine was made in the past. Bai Jing was very rude. What she visualized was directly a bright sun. The mind and imagination of these Taoist monks, because they deliberately did not set restrictions, completely released their spiritual consciousness, so they were able to manifest a clear outline in the small world, and they were all visible. But after all, they are all imaginary things. Zhou Xian has no idea what medicine is sold in Qin Pingan's gourd for the time being. Then Qin Pingan took control of that Feijin Jing Zhongyue, like a painter who is best at fine brushwork and line drawing in the world, and the monks imagined their own dojo like a copy, just like Qin Pingan from the copybook. Shizai Jian Qi Shu, obtained by King Fufang, only needs to be filled with double hooks and copied and written on the original, so it is the closest to the original. Qin Pingan's two natal flying swords, among which the bird in the cage, is an empty world like a human body. The other Jingzongyu turned into more than 400,000 tiny flying swords with one sword, and built the bones and muscles of this heaven and earth. I saw a white emperor city glazed pavilion with a roof covered with green glazed tiles. It was the first to stand around the feet of Jing Juzhong, and instantly rose from the ground. Countless golden silk threads began to spread upward, and each golden thread was a piece of gold subdivided by Jing Zhongyue. A flying sword came out. And this 9-story glazed pavilion, carved railings and jade buildings, raised eaves, hanging bells, plaque couplets. Even the inconspicuous traces that have been rubbed on some railings for a long time, and some plaques have been blown by thousands of years of wind. The tiny cracks and cracks in the sun are clearly visible everywhere. But the real mystery is that when Jing Juzhong opened the formation here, a glazed pavilion seemed to have opened a spiritual object, such as an order. And during this period, those golden threads are constantly adjusting the details, and they can sew and repair the loopholes and defects of those Taoist methods by themselves. And in the thousands of joint paths, the golden-colored glazed pavilion will instantly become the real color. When the last two golden threads that were still wandering were instantly connected. Array is one. The entire white emperor city Liuli pavilion like. Jing Juzhong tapped the railing, nodded and said with a smile, Shang Ku. Bai Jing frowned slightly and snorted, Is this all right? She couldn't help but add, This is too perverted. Then there is Xiaomo's dojo, which is still used by Qin Pingan to join forces. Jing Juzhong deliberately took the lead in visualizing the Liuli pavilion, which was actually equivalent to an invisible preaching, helping Qin Pingan to check and fill in the gaps. The most critical point is that there is no flexible object in the Liuli pavilion, and it is not difficult. As for the construction of the Lu Gong Temple, Qin Pingon is even more skilled and easy to do. Lu Yen, who was holding a sword on his back, stood in the shade of willow trees by the pond outside the temple, and looked at the swimming fish in the pond that surfaced and pecking at the poplar flowers and water insects. The speed at which the way of peace is improving is very impressive. After that, Zhou Xian's golden-filled peak became even more angry, because not only the mountains full of ancient trees, flowers and plants, but also the spirit birds flying and wandering outside the mountains appeared one by one. All kinds of buildings, landscapes, stones, springs, etc. Such dead objects, Qin Pingon made their facts and truths without any stagnation, but the appearance of those flowers, plants and living things means that this world, in addition to being real, it is still alive. This is what Li Hisung previously called assistance. After Qin Pingon sacrificed the sparrow in the cage, and before he built a dojo through Jing Zhongyue, Li Shixing did not sit idle, only to see this Confucian disciple, who can be described as a nameless Confucian among the younger generation of Lizhu Dongtian, dancing in the air. Void walks above all things, just like Lu Chen's praise for no one's realm, no realm. Ling Ran Yufeng has nothing to rely on, shouldering the road to travel is too empty. And Li Shixing seems to be able to ignoring the limitations of the caged bird. It is suspected that it is rushing to the virtual world, not being a prisoner of heaven and earth. The figure is free to shuttle in and out of the sword array, and Li Shixing constantly twists out talismans from his sleeves, most of which are extremely rare single characters. The characters such as mountain, water, cloud, rain, and thunder are always written on the talisman paper, and each of them is a character with great meaning, which helps this great formation of caged sparrows stabilize the borderline from both inside and outside, and at the same time. Only in the little matter of letting living beings appear in various dojos. Although Li Shixing and Qin Pingon separated again, the latter was not completely abandoned. The final result is that there are other small worlds within a caged bird world. Xiao Imo sighed for a long time and felt complicated. Because my son only mentioned the fourth floor to himself not long ago, the key to the second floor, the most important thing, is to fill a seemingly bottomless pit by spending countless talismans, and finally achieve a certain big in the realm. There is the beauty of the end of water is long and sky is limited, mountains are solid and soil is immortal. The sky is opposite to the ground. The mountains and rivers are interdependent, in which the 5 elements rotate, the sun and the moon. Rise and fall, the 24 solar terms throughout the year are progressive. The great road, the cycle goes on and on endlessly. And this scholar surnamed Li seems to have been able to achieve this level for a long time. Thousands of years later, the cultivators of Taoism will be full of geniuses, and their level of research in skills, and their climb to the top are indeed unmatched before 10,000 years. As for Bai Jing, he was sitting in a pocket-sized sun at the moment as big as a mountain. It was more like a kind of borrowing from Qin Pingon. It was specious about the ancient dojo that Bai Jing had imagined. Bai Jing didn't bother to care about the perfunctory and sloppy treatment of his own mountain master. Lu Yen smiled slightly. Zhou Xian stood on the top of the golden-filled peak, coughed a few times and praised with his heart. The young people today are really amazing. The future is terrifying, the latter is terrifying. The next time I meet with the old scholar, the other party will turn around and praise his closed disciple. Zhou Xian intends to echo a few words, so there is no need to go against his heart. Zhou Xian suddenly looked strange. Come on, this kind of secret road that should be hidden in the bottom of the box is revealed like this? What if Qin Pingon asks people about the sword in the future? Isn't he losing the first mover advantage? The old man used a series of decorative expressions. It can be seen that the combination of the 2 flying swords of life of the young hidden officer is indeed rare, and it has really entered the eyes of Fu Lu Yushuan. Lu Yen said, "We monks who are present will not spread it. It is difficult to say that some sneaky great monks try to draw conclusions through evolution." Zhou Xian nodded with a smile. "That's right, but to be cautious, I'd better use some small ways of closing doors and blocking roads. I can't let a young man suffer like this for business." I saw Zhou Xian put his fingers together, wipe out a talisman on the cuff of the purple robe, and then the talisman turned into a purple chi, lingering around Qin Pingon, spinning several times in an instant and then gradually dissipating. As a result, Zhou Xian immediately jumped up and scolded, "Your uncle, you are too careless in doing things. What kind of son of a is so haunted? What a grudge you need to deduce and observe Qin Pingon all the time?" After a while, Zhou Xian started scolding his mother again. It turned out that more than one force was secretly spying on Qin Ping's numerology trend. Compared with the former's way of pulling through astrology, the latter's methods were more subtle. Zhou Xian nodded lightly, raised his two sleeves, silently recited the word Kai Dao, two strands of purple talisman lingering around Qin Pingon, pulling away from the mountain dojo of the two forces at the same time. Lu Yen lifted. Raise your hands, put your fingers together, and flick your fingers on the two long lines of purple energy, and then wave your sleeves. There will be a sword light, like a rainbow, and it will disappear in a flash. In an instant, two sword lights as thin as strings, there was a thunderous vibration and momentum, and they went to two places, one in the vast world of the Middle Earth and the Divine Continent, and the other in one of the 5 cities in the Qingming world. A heavily guarded stargazing platform in the Lu family of the Yinyang family in Middle-earth was smashed in half by a Tianlei that fell straight down. And the planetarium in a certain city in Baiyujing was found by the sharp sword light that came from the sky following clues, and turned into powder on the spot. Outside the house, without saying anything, the precious robe on his body was directly invalidated, and he was frightened, stomping his feet in anger and annoyed. This treasure of immortal soldier rank can be repaired, but there are many things about that young hidden official that cannot be copied. The clues were all destroyed. Qin Pingon and the two seniors clasped their fists in thanks. Lu Yen nodded in greeting. You're welcome, it's just a deposit for you to help protect the Dao in the future. Zhou Xian smiled and said, no need to thank me, this old man dislikes such shady tricks in his life. Li Shixing and Qin Pingon stood side by side in a bright moon, looking into the distance. Don't worry, there are at least 2/4 of an hour before Li Xing will start to contact the wild world. Li Shixing stretched out his hand and pointed to the extreme distance. Mr. Sanshan Jiuho and Senior, you have each set up 3 Fushan mountains and a treasure river. It's just that the distance is so long that you can't really see it. Zhou Xian said with a smile. I'm just making small troubles, and I can't compare to the generosity of Mr. Sanshan Jiuho. It's laughable and generous. The last time I went to Fuyao Island after a fight, the hundreds of thousands of talismans that were not used up at that time were completely bottomed out and there was not one left. Qin Pingon couldn't help but ask, Brother Li, why don't you call some ascension cultivators to come and help? Li Shixing explained with a smile, some can't help and some can't get away. Zhou Xian stroked his beard and smiled. Saint Ya and Saint Wen, as well as Master Dong, the leader of the Confucian Temple, although they are all from the 14 realms, they belong to the right place and it is easy to do a disservice here. The implication of the old man is that the 14 realms of the right place and the right place have too many constraints and are not refreshing. Compared with the 2 methods of the time and the people of the way, it is still a bit less meaningful. As for the gods of the mountains and rivers in Haoranjizhou, of course, it is necessary to stabilize the mountain routes and water transportation within their respective jurisdictions. In fact, before Qin Pingon was brought here, the gods Daijia traveled around the 5 mountains and mountains in the Middle Earth, including Wangzhou. Li Yeho, including the 4 sea kings as well as Shenlin, Yanghua and other high-ranking princes of Dali in various continents, have each obtained a secret decree of the Confucian Temple, and then let them order all the subordinate gods in their respective territories and the city temples in various places. Be sure to return to the shrine immediately and sit firmly in the golden body of the temple. Zheng Juzhong had previously reminded Li Shixing that unless it was a last resort, don't come together easily. As a result, in the battle of the 3 religions, the Confucian scholar Li Li Hisung lost completely. There is a majestic air machine surging from the sky, like a tidal wave hitting the shore, and the caged bird world shakes with it. What a shocking mountain, and rain is about to come and the wind is full, and the real wind is in the sky. It made Qin Pingon feel suffocated in an instant. Bai Jing learned the way that millet grains spoke and hurriedly shouted, Mountain Master, open the door. Qin Pingon stabilized his body and soul and turned a deaf ear. I don't know you well. Li Shixing smiled and said, the opportunity is rare. It is indeed possible to properly open the gate of the world and accept the spiritual energy in it, and in addition to the pure spiritual energy, there are also some ancient Dao Qi lingering in the sky, wrapped in the wild world. To be able to escape the confinement of a great avenue of heaven and earth, to be the first to attack, and to hide in this turbulent Taoist tide, you might as well accept it first and return to Haoran afterward. There are probably 2 more tides like this. Be cautious and take it as soon as you see it, which is the consistent style of Qin Pingon. Qin Pingon immediately opened a door, and the bird world in the cage was like opening a pocket. The boundary at the door was in the shape of a horn which could accommodate more aura. After that, the riverbed waterway of more than 100 miles is like a small water bottle with a big belly lying on the ground, making the tide of spiritual energy easy to enter and difficult to retreat. In addition, a section of the riverbed has a rising trend, making the tide head from far to near, rushing. Entering the water bottle riverbed, the tide is pushing, the water is thundering, and the waves are surging. Qin Pingon is now learning and using it. He and Li Shixing painted a gourd and temporarily painted dozens of wind pictures. Characters thrown out of the door, such as dozens of Kazibu gods advocating, using the wind direction to fuel the tide. Fu Lu Yuxuan couldn't help but said, "Daoist fellow Chunyang, is it my illusion?" Qin Yingguan suddenly regained his energy and his temperament has changed. Lu Yen answered the question. Qin Pingon used this method to follow the formation principle of the Qiantang River tide in Beipingzu. The weather, wind direction, terrain and water flow all fit. In short, on the premise of not affecting the stability of the whole world, this is almost the best way for Qin Pingon to open the door to accommodate the most tidal aura. Bai Jing hurriedly turned his head to look at Xiao Imo next to the thatched hut on the ground. Xiao Imo, help me to say a fair word to the mountain master. It's said in the book I will be to blame if I don't take it. Lost and lost will never come again. After all, Xiao Imo did as the locals do, and he helped to bargain and said, "Young master will share the bill with you. If you agree, I will speak to master." Although Bai Jing has regained his true appearance, his temperament seems to be like the girl thanking the dog and said angrily, "What about killing pigs? Why don't you two just grab it?" For Jing Juzhong, Yu Xian and Lu Yen, the enlightened people, the number of cave houses and the aura of the acupoints have already reached the saturation level. Therefore, the aura of heaven and earth rushing in like a tide is a relatively useless existence. Xiao Imo, who is a perfect sword cultivator in the Ascension realm, is in a similar situation. Especially Jing Juzhong, the giant of the magic way, because he has achieved an unprecedented feat. 1 person and 214 realms, cultivation no longer needs aura. Only Jianxiu Bai Jing, she is the best at living. Before Qin Pingon was called, she took out a lot of messy magic weapons and began to store spiritual energy. After 2 waves of tides passed, she gained a lot. After all, this kind of tidal wave caused by the collision of the 2 worlds is not a spectacle and opportunity that an Ascension realm cultivator Yufeng can casually encounter when he comes to the outer world. As for why Bai Jing didn't directly rush out of this world, of course, the overall situation was the most important thing. These spiritual energy harvests were a piece of cake. After all, the real highlight was still to come. Qin Pingon glanced at Bai Jing and estimated the capacity of her pile of treasures to receive the additional tide of spiritual energy, and said in his heart, 5 or 5, how about it? It's easy to talk, it's very fair. Bai Jing laughed loudly and his body was galloping and he went straight to the mouth of the door. Yu Xian tuted, "Fellow Daoist Chunyang, look at it, Jianxiu is good, you can just hand over a sword when everything is going to happen." Tinkers and toilers. Sword cultivators like Bai Jing and Xiao Imo are indeed not like him, Yu Xian and fellow Daoist Chunyang. They also need to dispatch troops to those natal objects, and arrange the spiritual energy of the heaven and earth in the human world. It is necessary to adjust the state and carefully sculpt a series of details, because the Qi practitioners other than sword cultivators, when they are idle and have nothing to do, are completely different from the time of cultivation and retreat and fighting with others. The interior scene of the Qi cultivator, it is only said that a Qi trainer like Yu Xian also needs to use the unused natal objects, caves and acupoints with different types of talismans to build different formations in the body, and at the same time consolidate the physical body and stabilize the soul. Lu Yen smiled and said nothing. After all, he is a Taoist priest, but he also knows a few swordsmanship. Moreover, Lu Yan's road to becoming an elixir is different from any cultivator in the world. Qin Pingon took the initiative to say, "I was a guest at Yaolu in Tongyi's Hao town before and I heard fellow Taoist Qing talking about the 10 heroes of the ancient world, plus the alternates. It seems that there are 14 in total, but fellow Taoist Qing only mentioned a part of the list at that time. Yu Lao Shenxian, can you help clarify the confusion?" Yu Xian said strangely, "The old scholar is so knowledgeable, why didn't he tell you this?" Qin Pingon replied, "Mr. usually talks more about academic affairs and usually gets along with each other and doesn't talk much about it." Yu Xian choked for a moment. Well, if you don't have the opportunity, you have to create an opportunity to brag about your disciple, and if you have the opportunity, you will brag about your husband. It's no wonder that you are both students and students. Yu Xian pointed to the handsome little Mo at the foot of the mountain. He is old enough, and he is Qin Yingwen's squire, so don't talk about the old yellow calendar that he has seen and heard with his own eyes. Xiao Mo smiled to help explain. My son is devoted to cultivating Taoism every day and he is diligent in his studies. Qin Pingan was stunned looking at Xiao Mo. Yes, why didn't he think of asking Xiao Mo? Xiao Mo's face was the same as usual and he was even more confused. He thought that his son was only trying to talk to Fu Lu Yu Xian, and he never cared about the list of the top 10 people in the world. Doesn't seem like that. But it was Xing Juzhong who once again helped to answer the doubts in Qin Pingan's heart. Because of the taboos of the names of the 10 heroes of ancient times, Xianxia Tingtong did not dare to say more. For fear of causing unnecessary trouble, you subconsciously don't ask the people who are close at hand. It's an instinct to be around Xiaomo because deep down, you know very well that Xiaomo is likely to be a few of them, and there are several causal lines that are connected with each other. Yu Xian didn't think about anything. Since the young hidden official asked for advice humbly, he leaned on the old to sell the old, gave some pointers to the younger generation and asked with a smile. 10 How and 4 candidates, what did Qing Tong tell you? Besides, the last time the old scholar asked me for a drink he said it very honestly and to the end, and it was all open words from his own brothers. Cultivator, it is good to be approachable, old and good, but if it is too approachable it is not so good, more or less. You have to put on the air that a monk of the 14th realm should have, so next time you discuss matters in the Confucian temple, remember to speak loudly at one point or traveling on a certain continent, walking on the road, and encountering some unpleasant ascension realm, brother you just glanced sideways. Even if he said a word it was not domineering enough. The world's 10 heroes, there are the patriarchs of the 3 religions, the most holy patriarch, the Taoist patriarch, and the Buddha. There is also the first patriarch of the military family, the world's first Taoist, and the leader of Kendo. Qing fellow Taoist only mentioned these 6 and left out 4. Qin Pingan replied, the 4 candidates have all said the boss Jianxian Li Xing, Mr. Baizhe, and Mr. Sanshan. There is no distinction between the top 10 in the ancient times and the top 10 in the world. The world's first Taoist. The fairy hairpin city in the wild world was transformed by the Taoist hairpin of this Taoist priest. Today the gatekeeper of Luopao Mountain has a Taoist Xianwei, with a wooden hairpin. Kendo leader, unknown name. The first ancestor of the military family was imprisoned or exiled to the Yingyu, patiently waiting for the end of the 10,000-year cage. Only warriors like Qin Pingan, Chao Xiai, and Pei Qian have the chance to meet him. I believe that over the years, even if the candidates and identities in different positions on the strange mountain have changed, but I have seen this soldier. The number of pure warriors of the first ancestors in the past dynasties is still not too many. Qin Pingan's biggest regret now is that he knew about the existence of the 10 heroes in the world too late. Otherwise he must ask the boss Jianxian face to face if he knows the mysterious leader of Kendo. As for the 4 candidates, Li Xing, in the minds of Xiao Mo and Bai Jing, is more accustomed to using the title of Little Master for this scholar. Baizhe, this is the existence with the most hope of becoming the co-owner of the demon clan. Mr. 3 Mountains and 9 Marquis created Fulu Dao. One of the ancient 5 mountains, Taishan, is one of his dojos. Sword repair Qin Qingdu. Yu Xian Yinshu squinted his eyes and smiled. He sold a pass first and asked back. In addition to being a sword cultivator, Qin Yingguan is also one of the few martial artists at the end of the world. Then you know the accident of the first ancestor of the military family, and his relationship with him. The origin of martial arts? Qin Pingan nodded and said, there has been a total beheading in history, and the first ancestor of the military family is the first warrior of the 11th realm in the world. It's a pity that the warrior's body became a god. Rumor has it that he has only walked halfway. The top of the mountain is the end of the day, but if you go further up, you will never be able to reach the sky again. Yu Xian smiled and said, besides the 6 there is also Lan Qi, who is a female cultivator, the true ancestor of the world's refining masters, proficient in casting, and she personally created the mountain for refining things for life. Only then can the strength of the Taoist priests in the world be made soaring. As for the 14th level cultivator with the Taoist name Taiyin in the Qingming world today, she is actually following the path opened up by this female cultivator. One of them, Wuzhou, is one of the refinement avenues for later generations. The farthest one is nothing. Hey, Senior Lanqi and Wuzhou are both women. Is it a kind of protection from Senior Lanqi to future generations? Lu Yen reminded with a smile. Senior Yu, it would be better to give names less often. It turned out that Lu Yen was helping Yu Xian to break up the invisible cause and effect involved in those words. Yu Xian hurriedly bowed his head and said apologetically, I'm not keeping my mouth shut when I'm so excited. Qin Pingon silently wrote down the name Lan Qi. It is no wonder that later generations of the Yamashita dynasty would have the saying that the arsenal is forbidden and it is located in Lanqi. After a moment of silence, Yu Xian continued, since in ancient times there were gods in the sky and immortals on the ground, there would definitely be ghosts appearing, so their appearance made the difference between the yang and the underworld and the human world, and from then on there were different paths. As for the difference between heaven and earth, the difference between and man, there is incense in the world and there is a person who speaks for the sky, that is, Wu Zhu, who specializes in communicating with gods and people. Later, according to the ritual system of the Confucian temple, there were many priests including Lu Zhu. For example, your ancestors from the Yunlin Jiang clan in Aquarius are one of the great blessings. And the Great Wall of Sword Qi also set up sacrificial officials in the early years. Yu Xian raised his head to look at the sky, retracted his gaze, and then looked at the majestic Dharma image of Lixing in front of him and said slowly, the main incense in this vein, since Lixing was isolated from heaven and earth, is naturally broken, but it has spread from this. In fact, some branches of incense have never been completely cut off, among them Xianxia. In addition to the ritual officials responsible for divination and sacrifices in the Yamashita dynasty, there are also the emperors of various countries, as well as the Yinyang family and the Five Elements family on the mountain. Qin Pingon has silently closed the door and temporarily gathered the tide of spiritual energy into a well. Bai Jing has also returned home. She can be said to have returned with a full load. She sat cross-legged in the big sun, divided the spiritual energy and the Dao Qi into two, condensed some extremely pure beads respectively, and then took out 2 white jades from her sleeves. The plate, the big beads and the small beads fell on the jade plate and the sound was crisp and very pleasant. Bai Jing yawned when she was done with this and she was sleepy when she heard it. Such a boring review, it is better to look forward. For example, in the future there are 10 rich people in the world, there are her and Xiaomao, haha beautiful, and it is a pair of true gods. Well, feel the chest and stick to my conscience to say a fair word. Xiaomo's sword training qualification is slightly worse than his own, and he ranks among the top 10. I guess it's still a little overhang, so let's settle for the next best thing. Xiaomo finds a candidate to play. Several worlds are as simple as the wild world, it will be refreshing. She finds a few who can fight and joins forces to chop melons and vegetables for those ascension monks who have the opportunity to break through the realm. Competing for a name? Yu Xian looked at Bai Jing from the corner of his eye and had a headache. How could Luopa Mountain be so fearless? How could you imagine that the next great road race, which has not been seen in 10,000 years, is so simple? Especially it is the existence that comes into being in every world, not to mention the Ascension Realm Sword Cultivator. I am afraid that even a 14-realm cultivator like Wuzhou would not dare to provoke it easily, for fear of provoking the disgust of the heavens. With disgust, Yu Xian continued, there is also a female cultivator. Compared with the concentration of many top cultivators of the same era, she does the opposite, prefers to collect and compile various secretaries and spiritual books on the earth, and summarize and refining the world of thunder, water and fire. She walked alone through countless mountains, rivers and ponds, dedicated to gathering and studying various scripts such as Dao marks, thunder letters and cloud patterns on the earth, and finally she evolved 10 several Dao veins without exception, are all along the way that later generations are hailed as the avenue to the top, and the last time is the side path that can be ranked among the ancient earth immortals. As for the kendo leader, the reason why this old man wants to put him in the last place, I must mention it, is that this person is very strange, too strange. According to legend, this person has many flying swords, high rank and good talent. Breaking through the situation quickly, there is another point, bad temper. In all aspects there must be a best word. This person is not the first sword cultivator in the world. He was born out of nowhere with no name and surname and his roots and feet are unknown. In addition, he has a weird temperament. There has been no clear statement about the true identity and teacher's inheritance of this sword cultivator. Some say that he is purely self-taught in swordsmanship, and some say that he is lucky and has obtained a variety of swordsmanship and Taoism inheritance. Having said this, Zhou Xian couldn't help but joked. This sword cultivator and the boss sword Immortal are very similar to Chao Ci and Qin Yingguan on the road of martial arts today. It was less than a quarter of an hour away from the shock of the last tide, and the second wave of spiritual energy was ushered in, and this time, it obviously contained more scattered Dao Qi. As for the momentum of the tide, it has more than doubled compared to the last time. The caged bird world is like a small boat in the sea, swaying and bumping. Bai Jing grinned. She wanted to say something sarcastic, but she quickly wanted to understand the joints. Qin Shanzhu is really a diligent and thrifty housekeeper, and his face and name are all floating clouds. Zhou Xian and Lu Yan looked at each other and smiled. It seemed that there was no need to remind the young hidden officer. She stood up suddenly. Mountain Master, start work. While Qin Pingon opened the bottle-shaped door, he used the increasingly turbulent tide of spiritual energy to sharpen the blades of the two flying swords. Then stabilized. As a result, layers of glazed glaze appeared on the outside of the caged bird's barrier. This is a unique scene that can only appear when a long river of time rushes against certain roads, but Qin Pingon simply didn't have time to collect them. Suddenly, several subtle lights that were not easily detectable came in arcs in the void outside the sky, far away from the Holy Law and Mr. Xianxia, and went straight to the world of birds in the cage. It must be the sneak attack of some great monk in the wild world. Bai Jing originally just wanted to bury his head in earning money and was too lazy to pay attention to these tickling methods of attack. But when Xiao Mo appeared beside her, he immediately shouted, "Presumptuous." A sword light swept away in a hurry going out of the door. Dozens of sword lights are instantly separated outside the door, and then hundreds of sword lights are separated thousands of miles away. The key is that every time the sword lights diverge, it does not decrease at all. The sword energy and sword intent contained in the initial sword light. Bai Jing smiled and said, "Little Mo, my swordsmanship of casting a net is okay, right?" Xiao Mo just held his breath, watching those wild spells that were smashed by Bai Jing's sword light, and remained silent. After that, there were two more intensive attacking techniques, both of which were easily cracked by Bai Jing's casting a net with one hand, and neither could get close to the caged bird within 1,000 miles. Zhou Xian was quite surprised. The old man only knew about this woman Xianxia who met for the first time and called herself Xiego, but she quickly changed her tune and said that her name is Mei Hua now. And the strange fellow Daoist with the Dao name Shizhu spoke more and more frankly, saying that he and Bai Jing were sword cultivators from the wild monster tribe 10,000 years ago, who were in the Ascension realm and were woken up by Mr. Bai Zhe from their deep sleep. They are all practicing in Luopao Mountain now, and they will not get involved in the disputes between the two worlds. This time, being called to the world by the Little Master, Bai Jing was limited by the agreement and would only watch on the sidelines, just to join in the fun. But as a squire and dead soldier beside his son, he did not have any rules and regulations, so he would naturally help out with his sword. Do your best. Of course, Zhou Xian has a concept of the killing power of an Ascension realm sword cultivator, but is this white scene too strong? She only said that her hand cast a net, if it was used in those few ferry crossings in the wild world or some battlefield. Lu Yan said in a heartfelt voice, "The circulation of the great Tao is unhappy. Since ancient times things have fallen. For example, if Bai Jing stayed in the wild world, I guess I don't need to travel to Haoran." Zhou Xian laughed dumbly. The old man looked down a long time ago and found that the source of these harassment methods was extremely hidden, and they all used the means of shrinking mountains and rivers. Come prepared. Bai Jing wondered. Xiaomo, it's strange, it seems that Master Bai Zhe didn't make a move. I even made such a move and am not angry? Xiaomo said, "Let the two worlds collide. This is Zhou's method against the Holy Saint, and it has nothing to do with Master Bai Zhe." Another wave of drizzle-like attacking techniques rushed to the scene. Just as Bai Jing was about to attack, Xing Juzhong still turned a blind eye. Li Shixing has been making tricks in his sleeves. His face changed slightly and he shouted to Bai Jing, "Stop." Bai Jing rolled his eyes, hesitated for a moment, and was reluctant to put away most of the sword light that was castrated very fast. Xiao Mo as well as Zhou Xian and Lu Yan shot at almost the same time, but they were not aimed at those attacking techniques from the wild, but shattered Bai Jing's sword lights that were faster than lightning. In the end, about 10% of the sword light was left, still smashing part of the wild talisman. It was not until this moment that Zheng Juzhong took action and took most of the talismans into his hands at will. Zheng Juzhong spread out his hands and thousands of talismans instantly gathered and shrunk to a dozen mustard seeds, like stars spinning in the air. Over the palm of his hand, Zheng Juzhong smiled and sure enough, it was all aimed at Qin Pingan. Xiao Emo immediately turned to look at his son. Qin Pingan shook his head and his eyes indicated that Xiao Emo was fine, no need to anger Bai Jing. Bai Jing scratched his face and looked at Xiao Emo pitifully. It's true that she did a poor job this time. Where did she think of fighting on the mountain? She still needed to care about these twists and turns. 10,000 years ago it was not like this. Xiao Emo took a deep breath and said sullenly, remember to be more careful next time. Bai Jing subconsciously wanted to hold the sable hat, only to realize that she was showing her true body at the moment. She put away her hand, nodded lightly and said softly, Xiao Emo, you are so kind. Xiao Emo had a dark face and almost got goosebumps, so he had to keep silent. After planning to return to Luopa Mountain, be sure to tell the young master a few words about this matter. Whether it is with Xiego or Bai Jing, I really can't continue to get along like this. Standing at the top of Liuli Pavilion, Zheng Juzhong lightly clenched his fists. He also destroyed the talismans and the number was larger, but it did not hurt Qin Pingan's soul in the slightest, and did not even kill Qin Pingan's Taoism. After Zheng Juzhong let go of his hand, thousands of talismans in his palms have been turned into ashes, and they are scattered in the wind. He smiled and said, it seems that it is a talisman drawn by Zhou Qingao, and I entrust Fei Ran to send a greeting here. This close-knit disciple of Wen Hai is very careful and he deserves it. He is the #1 admirer of Lord Yingguan. End of this chapter. Sword of Coming Chapter 1002. Today's Zhou Qingao, the former leader of the Jiaoshan account Xu Huan, is indeed the #1 admirer of Qin Yingguan in 2 world-recognized places, just as Zheng Juzhong joked. When Qin Pingan was stationed at the half-sword Qi Great Wall, Bamboo Concubine asked the young hidden officer to allow him to climb the top of the city, and asked Qin Pingan for advice to resume the battle together. Later, the members of the discussions between the Confucian Temple and Tuyue Mountain, the 2 worlds confronted each other, and Zhou Qingao made no secret of his admiration for Qin Pingan in his words. Yu Xian glanced at the ashes of the talisman destroyed by Zheng Juzhong, nodded and said, good talisman. It's just that the talisman painter's methods are a bit shady, and he seems to be deliberate, obviously targeting this young hidden official. Because this talisman has a threshold limit, it is necessary to collect a person's blood. In addition, hair, nails, saliva, etc., can be used as the talisman paper for this talisman. It is possible to capture part of the soul and mind, and the talisman drawn will of course have a higher rank, and then draw the image of a Qi practitioner on the talisman and write the exact birth date etc., to be considered a talisman. Qin Pingan frowned slightly and quickly calculated in his heart. In the Sword Qi Great Wall, not only Qin Pingan himself was extremely cautious, but the 2 elders were also very careful as the housekeeper of Ning's house and Nailan Yeshing as the gatekeeper. Every time you wash your hair and trim your nails, you need to pay attention to tuck it up, and it is best to destroy it on the spot without leaving the slightest evidence. In addition, every time Qin Pingan drinks at the wine shop, he also pays great attention to such details. In addition, after entering the Summer Palace, Qin Pingan has been on the battlefield several times. In order to hide his identity, he will not be targeted by the wild Jiazi tent. He even used the means of disguising himself as a woman. The beautiful talk over there is often regarded as an excellent side dish by the criminal officer's line of swordsmen. Therefore, the only mistake was probably before Qin Pingan became a hidden officer, replacing Ning Yao and fighting with Li Zhen, the close disciple of the great ancestor of Tuyue Mountain. There are all kinds of strange techniques on the mountain and it is really hard to guard against. After returning to Haoran in the Yellow Flower View in the Mirage City of the Daquan dynasty, Qin Pingan, a swordsman named Pei Min who had been incognito, used an oil paper umbrella as a flying sword to penetrate his body. Because of the seal of that party, the spectator Lu Mao, who has passed the inspection of the Confucian Temple, can definitely rule out the suspicion unless... Are those 2 little Daoists who have not yet refined their qi? If there is a chance, Qin Pingan has to go back to Tong Yezhou to personally verify the matter. Or can he first send a letter to Mi Xiefeng with Fei Jian and ask Cui Dongshan to check it? Lu Yen smiled and said, Taoist distractions are the most exhausting, and this principle must be observed. Qin Pingon nodded and said, I will pay attention. The Taoist Chunyang was reminding Qin Pingon to be careful about distracting himself. Distraction is a typical high threshold on the mountain. The income is small, and the income is not proportional to the risk. First, you need to use a precious avatar of talisman paper, but the realm of the avatar is bound to be far lower than the real body. Moreover, the substitute cannot practice independently, so it is relatively tasteless. Second, because Qin Pingon is a martial artist with a tenacious physique, far superior to ordinary qi practitioners, he can sacrifice so many talismans at the same time. Candle, the spiritual energy of a puppet talisman will be consumed very quickly. For the monks of the upper 5 realms, this kind of behavior has almost no great benefit at all. On the contrary, once those clones suffer an accident, they cannot be recovered by the real body, causing the monks to be distracted. If you are damaged and your soul is incomplete, you will regret the green intestines and complain endlessly, so the gains outweigh the losses. Jing Juzhong said, the same mistake don't make the second time. I believe that there are already big demons in the wild world and they have started to study Chuiyu in depth, so you are looking for all the life porcelain. Hurry up. Because once the cultivator's mind cannot recover his true body, there are many sequelae, and each one is more difficult than the other. At light, it makes it difficult for monks to break the bottleneck of a certain state, and Taoism cannot be perfected. At worst, it is seized by hostile monks such as Fei Ran and Zhou Qinggao. Injuring the root of the Tao, the most terrifying consequence is to follow the example of the embroidered tiger Chuiyu in the wild world, and use a method similar to imitating porcelain figures and talismans and puppets, even if this move is far from Chuiyu's height. Is destined to not be able to reverse the customer as the main, but there is still a certain chance to form a situation that makes Qin Pingon a headache. The relationship between the two is like that of the porcelain man beside Cui Dongshan and the heroic spirit of Jingwenqing in the Beach of Bones. Loosely connected. A grain of mind. Even so, if the porcelain of life falls into the hands of the wild world? Qin Pingon nodded silently. Jing Juzhong continued. It's still too little to see the scenery on the top of the mountain, which is excusable. If it wasn't for Li Shixing who noticed the strangeness just now, he reminded everyone aloud, causing Bai Jing's sword light to only blow up a small part of the talisman. Otherwise, Qin Pingon will fall down and I believe the memory will be more profound. This is also the reason why Jing Juzhong knew about it for a long time but deliberately turned a blind eye. Someone who is a little smart doesn't make a big deal and ends up suffering a little pain. It's easy to blame luck instead of admitting that his brain is not very smart. The third wave of spiritual energy failed to shake the majestic dharma of Li Sheng, and then swept across the sea of Fushan. The Mr. Sanshan Jiuho standing in front of the crowd is like a mainstay, diverting itself when the tide passes by. Mr. Sanshan Jiuho, recognized as the master of magic and supernatural power, the ancestor of the world's talisman and alchemy. After the battle of ascending to the sky, he was hailed as the master of all methods and the ancestor of earth immortals by the mountain monks of later generations. The last time Qin Pingon went to the capital of Dali, he learned a lot of secrets from Aunt Feng and the old coachman. For example, Liju Dongshan's natal porcelain firing was first a secret method passed down by the pharmacy Old Yang and Mr. Sanshan Jiuho. In addition, just like the sword box that Shouchen carried on his back, Shouchen is very valuable. As Zhoumi's pioneering disciple in the wild world, Zhoumi gave this treasure as a gift in return for his apprenticeship. The sword box is painted with an ancient map of the 3 mountains for seas, 5 mountains and 10 destroys, which is very different from the Taoist talisman true map that has been widely circulated in later generations. Among them, the true shapes of the 3 mountains each have an authentic situation, as if the gods were sitting upright with their corpses, the wild monkeys walked on their backs and the clouds and dragons flew for 9 days. The 3 mountains are in charge of yin and yang, fortune and the 5 elements. After careful refining by hand, this sword box has more magical powers, and it can be refined into a sword mound, which can nurture 9 flying swords, and at the same time breed 9 different natal magical powers. Originally, a chi trainer who was not a sword cultivator, as long as he gets this box, it is not a sword cultivator who is better than a sword cultivator. And this thing was first cast by the 3 mountains and 9 marquis, but it only fell into the hands of Zhoumi. Because of the presence of Mr. Sanshan Jiuho, Zhou Xian was a taboo in the past, so he didn't tell Qin Pingon more rumors. It is said that the two female cultivators among the 10 richest men in the world, the trainer Lan Qi and the Qi trainer who opened up many other ways, in fact they all have a very good relationship with Mr. Sanshang Jiuho. Tui Dongshan once made an analogy: in the outer world, let alone a monk of the Ascension, even a monk of the 14th level, is a child with bare hands, and every world he faces is an iron ball. Zhou Xian sighed. I have to admit that Zhou Mi's move is still a conspiracy. Qin Pingon wondered. If the entire wild world is regarded as a fairy that flies through the air, then there must be a place in the wild hinterland. As the hub of the formation to drive this giant fairy, is the spiritual energy of heaven and earth as firewood? Yuxian Yanshu shook his head. I haven't seen the doorway for the time being. Lu Yen squinted to look somewhere in the wilderness and said solemnly, half of the spiritual energy was created by throwing money at it and half of it came suddenly, sword energy. Xing Juzhong twitched the corners of his mouth. If Lord Yingguan insisted on rushing to help, instead of diverting in the middle of the road and turning to ask Jiantua Yueshan, he would have added a pile of firewood. Li Shixing waved his sleeves, and a picture similar to the trajectory of the stars in the sky appeared in the air, explaining, Zhou Mi once used the vast mountains and rivers including Jialonggu, Fuyazu and Tonggishao to build a hidden formation by himself. The traces are very shallow, just like a vulgar man using a fingernail to draw a trace on his arm. This formation was only revealed not long ago, but it vaguely separated the yin and yang from the vast world and the wild world, so that the original two worlds are now just like two magnets that attract each other. When the Abbot Firen opens the great formation, the entire barren world, the bow of the boat begins to shift immediately, plus the big demon has been planning for a long time outside the sky, and secretly moved his hands and feet. This ferry then it turned into a green road. Trajectory with faster and faster sailing speed. The third wave of spiritual energy is coming. Because he almost made a big mistake just now, Bai Jing rarely took the initiative to take a step back. Shanju, this time the income will be divided into 28. Qin Pingon said, no, just follow the old rules. Roughly estimated, once opening the door, it is equivalent to taking an Ascension Realm reserve full of aura into the bag. And the spiritual energy of heaven and earth is the money of the gods. After all, Shuahua, Shaoshu and Guyu are three. The reason why these fairy coins can become common coins on the mountain is that they contain different degrees of pure aura. The reason why Jianxiu is able to be the top of the 4 difficult ghosts on the mountain is that when Jianxiu fights with people, the spiritual energy that needs to be used and consumed is far less than that of ordinary Qi practitioners. Like Huang Luan, one of the 14 old throne great demons, the refining palace Guandian Pavilion Dojo, the ancient broken secret realm etc. are second-class caves, so on the premise that the attacking strength of the two sides is roughly equal, it is easy to be attacked by their own spiritual energy. Huang Luan consumed a fellow monk to death. Yu Xian squinted his eyes and said, the only fly in the ointment is that this 1,000-mile land is too small, even if we have the means to reverse the mustard seeds, but no matter how close and infinitely close to the truth the dojo is, it will eventually be limited. Yuzhen, not to mention the fact that the site is too small, I am afraid that it will be difficult to fully display our skills in the future. After all, there is the suspicion of being a dojo in the snail shell. Let's get together and nest together, not to fight the enemy but to face the whole world. Collision in case. In an instant. It's not very good. Even if we work together to split the wild world, I'm afraid it will still be difficult to stop the general trend. A few of them, no matter how powerful they are, can't directly cut the wild world in half. Unless everyone present is all 14 monks? Therefore, the old man deliberately said vaguely, and in the end he still felt that the content of the words was rather unfavorable, and it was not appropriate to say it directly, lest the words become a prophecy. Qin Pingon said, You Lao Shinxian, my world can be separated and it does not affect the one of the formation. Yu Xian was stunned for a moment. You kid didn't say it sooner. Of course, it wasn't that Qin Pingon deliberately sold out. He accepted the tide of spiritual energy 3 times. In addition to making money on the surface, it was also a means of checking the results and determining the degree of operation of the heaven and earth law. Now it's not just an estimate on paper but a real knowledge, so Qin Pingon explained, it's just that the subtiendi that have been split should not be too far apart, and the distance between them should not exceed 3,000 miles at most. Within miles, the impact and loss on each of your dojos is estimated to be no more than 10%. Yu Xian nodded and smiled and said, enough. Not to mention 10%, even if it's 20% of the loss, We can easily make up for it with our techniques and refining things. If a few of their dojos could occupy 3,000 miles alone, it would be a huge difference compared to being crowded in 1,000 miles. Zheng Zhuzhong suddenly asked, if I give you some more gold and copper coins to crawl, can I increase the depth and width of this world? Qin Pingon said without hesitation, yes, but there is a precondition. At least 500 gold and copper coins must be invested. Otherwise it will be of little significance and it will be difficult to make a qualitative change. If only 300 or 400 gold and copper coins are added. At most, when the universe is large and the universe is small, it will affect the stability of the entire world, such as too much dilution of the cultivator's dharma. It is an empty shelf, it is better to have nothing. The 4 directions above and below are called the universe, and throughout the ages it is the universe. This is the fundamental supernatural power of Qin Pingan's bird in the cage and Jing Zongyi's 2 flying swords. It happened suddenly and there was no preparation. If he had known about today's incident, Qin Pingan would definitely carry the remaining 300 gold and copper coins in his Chuanfu treasury with him at all times. It's just that money is hard to buy early, no, and I plan to never keep up with the changes. Qin Pingan originally planned to take the 300 gold and copper coins with him next time he and Lu Jinglong traveled to the vast continents when he entered the Jade Realm. It is not easy to improve the rank of the 2 natal flying swords, especially to obtain some new natal supernatural power. The so-called sword refining of a bird in a cage is actually the improvement of Qin Ping's realm. The higher the realm, the bigger the world, and the bigger the world. As for the second Jing Zhongyue, the most intuitive manifestation of improving the rank is the number of flying swords. When Qin Pingan formed pills at the head of the city, the number of flying swords that could be differentiated was about 100,000. After successfully entering the Jade Pure realm again, after stepping over a big step, the number jumped directly from 200,000 in the nascent soul realm to 400,000. Although he traveled through the wild world, his cultivation base fell to nascent soul, but Fijian's quality, the rank did not decrease accordingly. When he borrowed the 14th realm from Luchin, because Qin Pingan did not set out to create a long river of time at that time, according to the deduction and estimation at that time, if he can indeed become one of the 14th realm in the future, the rank of the moon in Fijianjing will be improved. For Jingachiyu or Tianshangyu, millions of flying swords can be differentiated. Facts have proved that Qin Pingan's estimate was still too conservative at that time. According to the current situation, as long as enough gold and copper coins are eaten, it is very likely that the number of flying swords can climb all the way to 2 million or more. No wonder it was said that there were no sword cultivators who had enough money in the world. Zheng Zhuzhong smiled and said, I just have 300 pieces of gold and copper coins on hand. I can exchange them into grain rain money. It's better to use 1 to 10. How about 3,000 pieces of grain rain money and 3 cents of interest per year? Qin Pingan was expressionless and said solemnly, yes. If 1 gold refined copper coin was exchanged for 10 grain rain coins, if it were placed 30 years ago, it is estimated that except for the gods of mountains and rivers who need to repair their golden bodies, almost no cheap practitioners are willing to trade. But the key is that today's gold and copper coins are not as rare as they were in the early years. Qin Pingan really didn't believe that Mr. Jing only had 300 gold and copper coins. Zheng Zhuzhong waved his sleeves, and an object appeared in front of Qin Pingan. It was an ancient inkstone, but unfortunately there was no inscription. It is in the shape of the hand-painted inkstone with the sun and the moon on the same wall. The back of the inkstone is chiseled with eye posts. Qin Pingan is very knowledgeable, and at a glance he can see the arrangement of the 28 constellations. Xiao Emo immediately looked at Bai Jing, who was busy picking up money. Bai Jing, who had regained her true appearance, was a tall and beautiful woman. She laughed. It's all a dowry. Zheng Zhuzhong was clearly trying to. Lu Yen said with a smile, in the matter of wealth and silk, the poor people are impoverished. The words of Daoist Chunyang were alluding to. It is universally recognized that Zhou Xian has no shortage of immortal money. Li Shixing followed with a smile and said, there is not a single gold and copper coin on the younger generation. Gold refined copper coins are first class and in short supply. Zhou Xian had to say, Master Chen said that at least 500 gold and copper coins are needed. To be safe, Mr. Zheng has already given 300 coins, and the old man will take out another 300 coins. According to Mr. Zheng's rules, The principle it is superimposed every year and calculated according to 3-point interest. In fact, in the mountains, once the interest is settled on an annual basis, it is a bit suspicious of usury. Then Zhou Xian added, it's better to barter, and the principal and interest should be calculated as gold and copper coins. It really wasn't that Zhou Xian was taking advantage of people's dangers. It's really that the gold and copper coins are too scarce now, and in the next 100,000 years, the circulation will only decrease more and more. The key is that this thing involves the development of Zhou Xian's 2 great talismans, which happen to be related to the long river of time. These 2 talismans, together with the rest of the talismans that served as the bottom of the box, were Zhou Xian's main support after he entered the 14th realm. If it weren't for this, with Fulu Yuxuan's temper, let alone 300 gold and copper coins, it would be no problem to double it. Qin Pingon nodded, no problem. Anyway, there are 300 of them in their own treasury. When the matter is over, they can be returned to Zhou Xian immediately. The other party agreed so readily, but it made Zhou Xian somewhat uneasy. Being called an old immortal by a young man and being an elder is also a burden. Zhou Xian couldn't help but change his words. It's really difficult, but it can be negotiated, and the interest can be converted into Gu money. Qin Pingon shook his head and said, there's no need for this, just settle with gold and copper coins. Jing Juzhong told Qin Pingon the number 1005 in his heart. Although there is only one number, Jing Juzhong's meaning is very simple, that is, to cross the next big step. Do you need this number of gold and copper coins for Qin Pingon? Qin Pingon directly shook his head. It means that even if the number is sufficient, 1,500 gold and copper coins can be added now, and Qin Pingon will not be able to refine them in a short time. Jing Juzhong also shook his head. There are so many gold and copper coins in Beidasheng, but they don't give them. Qin Pingon even omitted to nod his head. The younger generation will not open their mouths and ask themselves for nothing. Almost at the same time, Zhou Xian communicated with Jing Juzhong in a loud voice, and asked if the 2 sides took out more gold and copper coins, whether Qin Pingon could go further in this world. It was obvious that Zhou Xian was ready to lose all 300 or more gold and copper coins. After getting the answer that no additional gold and copper coins were needed, Zhou Xian sighed, obviously a little regretful. In fact, Jing Juzhong began to collect gold and copper coins intentionally as early as 1,000 years ago, and purchased fragments of the golden body of the gods through various channels. About 100 years ago, Beidasheng bought this thing wantonly regardless of the cost. It started from Jing Juzhong's private ownership, and it became a course for the 5 realms of qi practitioners in the whole Beidasheng. All need to pay a sum of gold and copper coins of varying amounts. In addition, there are many shan zaixio which can be used as a stepping stone. Beidasheng also specially set up an unconventional side door hilltop for this purpose. It is not named, but it can be practiced here and obtain the loan from Beidasheng. Secrets Taoism. Qin Pingon asked Li Shixing in his heart, can you stop it? There is no way to give an answer right now. Li Shixing said truthfully, what happens next is possible. In short, we have to prepare for the worst. Especially you, although you are only the abbot of the big formation, it seems that you only need to watch on the sidelines. In fact, you only need to maintain 2. It's not easy to keep the flying sword from falling. Qin Pingon nodded, mentally prepared. Li Shixing smiled and said, only by planning for the worst can you be qualified to expect the best result. The eldest sword immortal of the Great Wall of Sword Qi Qin Qingdu. Qingming World by Yujing is the great headmaster Ko Ming. The Confucian temple of Zhongtu is ceremonially holy, and the rest of the guests. It seems that they are the kind of existence that can be extremely trusted. Qin Pingon got 600 gold and copper coins and immediately began refining them. At the same time, he stretched the distance of 3,000 miles from the various dojos in the world. In the distance is the back of the young cultivator. Mr. Xianxia, who was a candidate for the top 10 in the past, has 3 mountains and a river at his feet. It's not impossible for the most holy master to make a move, but once the most holy master consumes Daoxing here, it means that there will be an extra chance of winning in the future. In addition, here the most holy masters need to face a problem that is similar to the situation of the sub-sages, the Wenshengs and the Confucian temple leaders. After all, the founders of the 3 religions are the ultimate in the path of fitness and location. Of course, the founders of the 3 religions are not only just the right place. Therefore, it can only be the lesser of the 2 evils. To investigate the root cause, in addition to the barren world, The common confidant of the four worlds is the one who has gone to the sky and left. In a sense, in the past 10,000 years, the most heroic person no one has been careful. This former Houran Jiaxing passed 3 stages successively, and quietly entered the 14th realm in the wild world. Destroy the great wall of sword qi that has stood for thousands of years. In the former hometown of Houran, the 3 continents of Tongye, Fuyao and Jinjiao were completely sunk. In the end he entered the ancient heaven and overlooked the whole world. Just like a wonderful novel, the timeline is as long as 10,000 years, and there are countless heroes and heroes on the pages. As a result, the last page, of course the penultimate page, was densely packed and repeated, and only 2 words were written, one name. Just like a certain inner thought of many monks on the top of the mountain in several worlds today. Whether Qin Qingdu or Tui Yu the embroidered tiger, are no longer alive after all. Only careful, still not dead. And standing at the forefront of the liturgy, how easy is it? In fact, Li Xing is the most difficult person no one. Because the way of combining Tao is the ritual of the entire vast world, it is very possible that the holy rites block the collision of the wild world. It is very likely that they can only rely on the physical body and the law, and cannot use the supernatural powers. This is why Qin Pingon asked Li Shixing if he could stop him. Otherwise it's just nonsense. Qin Pingon refined 600 gold and copper coins into the long river of time, very fast, and then said, "Junior has an idea. Is it possible to superimpose the formation?" Zhou Xian smiled and said, "Oh? Stacked formations? Is Master Qin still proficient in formations?" Then Qin Pingon quickly expressed his general thoughts in his heart. The next stack. Zhou Xian took the lead, tore off the purple qi robe with the yin and yang fish gossip on his body, and tossed it out, covering the sky and the sun. Zhou Xian stretched out his hand to draw a talisman and outlined the 2 Tai Chi rituals. Based on the original 2-wheeled pocket sun and moon in the cage, the scale was doubled and it suddenly became brighter. At the same time the mysterious yin traveled far away, sitting in the bright moon, and the new big sun changed from the original white scene to the pure yang lu yen. Behind the yin of Fu Lu Yu Xian, a bright moon wheel appeared, and behind the Taoist priest Lu Yen Faxiang, there was a huge golden sun. In addition, there are still 3 talented people in the formation. Jing Zheshang's Yang Shin, Jin Shin and Yin Shin are divided into superior and inferior, and they sit in the same place. After that, the inspiration came from the opening of Xianwei's manuscript. Qin Pingon divided the heaven and earth into 4 seasons of the year, and slowly rotated at a speed much slower than the rise and fall of the sun and the moon. Li Shixing helped to create the weather of heaven and earth, such as wind, rain, thunder, lightning, clouds and fog. As the founder and host of this great formation, just now he acted according to Jing Zheshang's deduction results. Qin Pingon had to reluctantly and bravely sacrificed 5 natal objects belonging to the 5 elements, which was more than the rest of the monks. Piecing together the 5 elements with a higher rank, the effect is slightly better. Zhou Xian sacrificed 12 talismans which belonged to the December month. Among them, Jianxiu Bai Jing and Xiao Mo were in charge of taking turns to sit in it whenever the leap month appeared. Then there are the superimposed 24 solar terms, which is Li Zixing's method. Then came the more subdivided 72 hours. Qin Pingon drove the ducks into battle again, and sacrificed 72 seals carved by his own hands. Finally, Li Shixing, Jing Juzhong and Zhou Xian respectively, presided over and sacrificed a Taoist Luotian Dajiao, Zhoutian Dajiao and Putian Dajiao Gongzhu Shangzhou, Diao Zhongtian Shuanging Biu Shuang Danshao. The young-looking Mr. Sanshan Jiuho finally turned his head for the first time and looked back at the scene behind him. Although he quickly retracted his gaze, it was just such a subtle movement that still made Bai Jing feel a little sour. She and this guy are not unfamiliar either. The 2 sides met before and the other party didn't say anything. At this moment, several figures from the wild world appeared outside the sky. But they didn't dare to get close to this layered formation. The 2 sides were very far apart. Bai Jingxian had nothing to do. She held her chin with one hand, waved to the old friends on the other side who met again and smiled. Good luck tricks people and turns friends into enemies. The group of monks were all ancient demons who were awakened by Bai Zai. For the time being, I didn't know whether they were watching the fun or disrupting the situation. The great demon officer B is a beautiful woman with a pale face and scarlet lips. Her natal supernatural power is the water method. It is rumored that she can freeze a long river of time before 10,000 years, but when the river water freezes, All living beings have already melted away. In the long river, beside Guan Yi, there is still the young man who likes to squinting at people and smiles all day long. His pseudonym is Hu Tuesday. An old Taoist priest who carries a sword and rides a deer and wears a bamboo crown on his head. Now his pseudonym is extremely vulgar, Wang Youwu, but his Taoist name is quite elegant, Shanjun. The old Taoist has always considered himself to be the direct disciple of the Taoist. When he woke up this time, he had a wish to visit the mountains to find a teacher, so as to continue the relationship between master and apprentice. A small old woman with a hunchback holding a cane in both hands, among the wild monsters, she is the only one who is frantically absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and those scurrying Dao Qi, and her rotten physique and old appearance begin to appear a kind of naked eye. Visible rejuvenation. Seeing this, Bai Jing just pouted, turned his head and explained to Qin Pingon with a smile. This wife and aunt's specialty is refining qi and transforming the spirit into reality. 10,000 years ago I didn't know how many worlds she had eaten. Reiki later that Huang Wan is to follow her old way. Speaking of this, Bai Jing smiled wickedly. The mountain master, you have a lot of reading and a lot of knowledge. If it were you, how would you scold that Huang Wan? Qin Pingon said indifferently, the one who is on the same track as the overturned car. The voice was not loud, but it was clearly heard by the old woman. The old woman put her chin on the crutch and sneered, "This is the last hidden officer of the Great Wall of Sword Qi? What a high level." Xiao Imo raised the walking stick in his hand, pointed at the boy with heavy pupils and introduced Qin Pingon. Young master, he is now under the pseudonym Li Go and his Taoist name is Fei Qian. Among the big monsters, defense comes first. This time, after a lapse of 10,000 years, he appeared in the wilderness, took back 8 immortal weapons in one breath and returned them to the Lord. Nicknamed Silverfish, he likes to eat books. The dojo of Book City never sleeps. Bai Jing nodded vigorously and said, "This guy is full of treasures and every piece is valuable. Just say that yellow Qinkuan bag and that monster-catching gourd. I've been greedy for a long time, Mountain Master. I have a chance. When I look back, I want to destroy it. Under the rules, let's work together to kill him." Next to the handsome young man Li Gu, stood a shrewd man holding the back of his head with both hands. This ancient demon, who was called Anonymous by Bai Jing, was most interested in being the only young hidden officer in the opponent's camp who was purely a martial artist. The young cultivator behind Li Xing turned his head and looked at this unruly wild monster. Except for the Anonymous, who still had a lazy expression, the other big monsters were all facing the enemy and began to hold their breaths. Sort of coming Chapter 1003. Mr. Sanshan Jioho just glanced over there, and the group of contemporaneous monsters restrained a lot. Qin Pingon sighed with emotion. This is the unique momentum of a candidate for the 10 ancient heroes. Different from the mountains of later generations, who also pay attention to the shadow of a person's famous tree, there will be many masters of bamboo strips and bamboo strips with free realm, and Qi practitioners who participated in the battle to the sky or watched the battle with their own eyes. On the top, being able to reach the top of the world step by step without exception, are all beings who are extremely familiar with fighting, not talking about others, just talking about Xiao Mo beside Qin Pingon. Today, which is not the so-called invincible. Although this is the first time the two sides have met each other, Qin Pingon seems to have a long history and connection with this Mr. Sanshan Jioho after careful research. It is only said that the last time I rushed to the wild hinterland, I finally made a sudden detour and went to Tuyue Mountain, thanks to the 3 mountain talisman. Although this big talisman was not created by Mr. Sanshan Jioho, but according to Lu Qin, it was because the senior was a guest in Baiyijing Green City that year, and after some inquiries the senior brother drew this talisman. Before the big headmaster Ko Ming disappeared, the Jade Imperial City, the 12th floor of Yujing leaning on greenery, often regularly preached the world publicly without any threshold, and without restricting the origin and realm of monks, all can pass through. Set up a series of gates in the territory of several states to enter the city. Mr. Sanshan Jioho once concealed his identity and entered the city to observe. In the end, Ko Ming noticed the trace, performed the junior salute, and asked the 10-strong candidate to learn about Fu Lu's knowledge. In addition, the Sanshan blessed land occupied by Wan Yaozong was once one of the dojos of Mr. Sanshan Jioho. As for the founder of Wan Yaozong, Qin Pingon guessed that he might be one of the anonymous disciples of this senior. Otherwise, how could there be such a coincidence that a young woodcutter from Tonggishao got a picture of a fairy family by mistake, ignoring the prohibition of the formation, and was able to break into a blessed land? You must know that in the Jade City of the Wild Moor dynasty, Qin Pingon got a coral pen holder, which is the key to open a copybook in the Linlanglu of Baiyujing, which contains the secret of the Dragon Palace. Incorporating a high-rank Dadu Dragon Palace into a copybook, the magical powers are already mysterious enough. Lu Qin even guessed that there are still water creatures alive in that site. What is even more surprising is that a Baiyujing landlord, it took 2,000 or 3,000 years to open the ban on the mountain, and he was never allowed to enter. It can be seen that Mr. Sanshan Juhao's talisman skills are high. Bai Jing suddenly opened his mouth and asked, "Shan, let's discuss. While I still have a little time, I want to go and meet friends. Don't worry, I will never delay the business. If you don't believe it, I can issue a military order and I will be in the university. When the formation starts to defend against the enemy, if I fail to return to this place, I will raise my head to see you." In fact, Bai Jing is very self-aware. She has nothing to do here. Li Yu, who sits in one of the stacked formations compared to the entire array, is the relationship between a piece of snow money and a grain rain money, not to mention the other Xiao Mo watched from the side. Qin Pingon looked at Bai Jing, who was eager to try, and nodded, "Go quickly and come back." Presumably Bai Jing won't turn his back on the battlefield. If she really wants to, it would be a good thing to leave the big array early. According to the previous agreement at Yellow River, Bai Jing personally promised Bai Zhe not to be an enemy of the wild, but her understanding is actually very simple, that is, not to be an enemy of Bai Zhe. Since using the entire wild world as a hammer, it was the careful method, not the instructions of Bai Zhe, so she must not be breaking the law by playing the drums here. Moreover, when Bai Jing looked at Li Jiao and his posture, it didn't look like he was here to fight. At most he was here to join in the fun. In the local dialect of the town, he was standing by the ditch and watching the flood. Besides, she was really going to break the rules. With Bai Zhe's temper, she must have appeared long ago and taught her how to behave. Therefore, with the permission of Qin Pingon, Bai Jing laughed loudly, raised his hand and patted his head, regaining the appearance of a sable-cap girl. Her figure instantly transformed into a rainbow light, and stretched out tens of thousands of miles in the sky. The light of the sword is thin but condensed. In the blink of an eye, Bai Jing or Xiago rushed to the vicinity of the wild monster. One suddenly hovered and pointed his finger at the boy with heavy pupils. Xiago Yong did not know where to learn from. The native dialect who came stretched out his hand to hold the mink hat and grinned. "Li Go, how much do you want to play with my sister?" Qin Pingon asked. "What is Bai Jing doing?" Xiao Mo hesitated for a while, and after confirming that his son was not saying something weird, he answered honestly, "She plans to ask Li Go about the sword." Zhou Xian sat cross-legged on the top of Jinjin Peak, grinned straight, raised his palms and patted his knees. Lu Yen twisted his beard and smiled. Qin Shance's question was a bit redundant. Qin Pingon wondered, isn't she afraid of being surrounded? The 6 ancient monsters, including Li Go, are all the most powerful in the wilderness throne. Fei Fei, Huang Wan and others are inferior to these old antiques with a Taoist age of more than 10,000 years. Although Bai Jing is a genuine Ascension Realm perfect sword cultivator, she is not a pure sword cultivator in the 14 realm after all. Xiao Mo explained patiently, Bai Jing fighting with people has never been a brain. Then Xiao Mo added, Bai Jing is one of the very few sword cultivators who are not afraid of being beaten. In other words, Bai Jing likes to single out a group and is extremely good at counter-killing. Therefore, in the ancient years, Bai Jing had no enemies. First, Bai Jing will not take the initiative to provoke those who are destined to provoke, such as Little Master, Bai Zhe, Bixiao Cave Master, etc. This is also Bai Jing's shrewdness. Furthermore, every time Bai Jing uses the sword, she will never give up until she achieves her goal. In short, she is extremely patient and persevering when she has a grudge against her. It is rumored that when Bai Jing was still in the realm of Earth Immortal, he once spent a full 30 years, entangled with a senior monk in the Ascension realm, while cultivating and striving to break through the realm, while attacking and killing, often a single blow fails to achieve a far escape. The funny scenes of chasing and being chased were constantly staged, and when Bai Jing finally entered the Ascension realm, it was the moment when the cultivator completely died. Guan Yi's group of monsters, apart from Wuming's and Li Go who have a real friendship, the rest are not even allies to each other. If Bai Zhe hadn't pressed them down, they might have been trusting one moment before, and then they would have been brainstorming the next moment. In the past, Xiaomo was used to this style of behavior and never bothered to think deeply. When I got to Luopao Mountain, I chatted with Zhou Xian earlier, and the old gentleman said a word that made Xiaomo Daigo enlightened. As long as you pursue that pure freedom, your greatest enemy is not the rules, but the freedom of all others. On the other side of the battlefield, Li Jiu looked at Bai Jing, who was confused, and said in a deep voice, "Are you annoying?" The last time they were on the Huluo River, the two sides had already clashed. He didn't even know where he had provoked Bai Jing. To say that the other party covets his own magic weapon as for? It needs to be known that the wealth that Bai Jing has accumulated is equally profound. Xiago waved his hand. "It doesn't matter who you are, let's retreat away and make room for Li Jiu and me. Don't linger and make a quick decision." The man crossed his arms around his chest, motionless, and said with a smile, "It's okay to move the place, you can just think I don't exist." Xiago looked away. Guan Yi and Hu Tu shrunk the mountains and rivers and went straight away. The old woman snorted coldly, a cane. Although she was full of complaints, she did not dare to stay on the battlefield so as not to be harmed by Qi Yu. The bamboo-crowned old Taoist held a whisk, lightly patted the antlers. The white deer jumped several times, trampling circles of colorful ripples in the void outside the sky, like birds fluttering on the branches, fleeting. Xiago smiled and asked, "Then let's fight." As for the anonymous person standing in the same place, it's just an eyesore, not a hindrance. Li Jiu looked dull and didn't say a word. In an instant, the youthful appearance of Li Jiu was cut off, and a head was thrown high, and then it seemed to be bumped for no reason, like being kicked and flying out with a slamming sound like thunder. Changed to a normal monster, the real body was cut off from the head. Very far away, Guan Yi, who was watching this questioning sword, had a complicated expression. This was the horror of the superposition of Bai Jing's two natal flying sword magical powers. There is no sword chi, and even Bai Jing does not need to use the sword will, using a flying sword that seems to exist in the long river of time, easily kills people. It is said that Bai Jing gave the two natal flying swords two names, similar to her endless Taoist names, which seemed very sloppy, upstream and downstream. This means that when Bai Jing left the great formation of the young hidden official abbot, she had already formally asked Li Go about the sword, so she did not give the other party a chance to refuse to lead the sword. Because it involves the flow of the long river of time for all the monks on the mountain in the world 10,000 years ago until now, it has always been an unsolved mystery. So how to restrain the two flying swords of life that Bai Jing has the first mover advantage? Almost incomprehensible. How can each Qi practitioner who is in the now stop the attack of two flying swords from the past and the future? Zhou Xian, who was sitting on the top of the golden-filled peak, raised his hand, put the back of his hand on his knee, kept his 5 fingers clasped together, and squinted at the battlefield in the distance. "Fellow Daoist Chunyang, in the face of this unreasonable flying sword, it's tricky." Lu Yen smiled and said, "Those who are forced to lead the sword are not at a disadvantage." Zhou Xian praised, "These old seniors who have lived for more than 10,000 years really still have 2 brushes." On the surface, if a Qi trainer is a prophet and is proficient in fortune-telling, he seems to be able to deal with flying swords that seem unreasonable, but the battlefield is changing rapidly, especially when facing an Ascension Realm sword cultivator. Feijian trajectory. Jing Juzhong glanced at Xiego. This Bai Jing is indeed a kendo genius who has been famous 10,000 years ago. As an outsider and bystander, she actually re-engraved their stacked formation to a certain extent. The trajectory of the sword is to follow the formation. Not only that, but she also deliberately pushed back all the way, so Feijian was extremely fast and it was destined to get faster and faster. Although Bai Jing's copying is a little rough, and the meaning of the Tao is not enough, it is enough to make people look at it with admiration. Even if she is not a sword cultivator, she must not be low on the Tao. The first sword is said Bai Jing is a courtesy greeting. Then came the real questioning. Sure enough, as predicted by Jing Juzhong, Xiego seemed to be sitting on the main altar, and the abbot held a mighty grand ceremony, worshipped 3,600 gods and constellated the stars. Xiego raised a hand, smiled and said 2 words, Luo Fan. 3,600 lines of fierce sword light occupying the star position, instantly converged at one point, that is, the separation of the corpse. Li Go was poked into a hornet's nest by the sword light. It was more than a blur of flesh and blood, bones were shattered, and the entire cave of the world was blasted. But even so, no one felt that Li Go was defeated and he might not even be injured. Li Jiu put together a complete body in an instant, waved his hand again and put the head that was casually stepped on by a 1 foot back on his neck. The air was flowing, the light was shining, and his face was the same as before. As for the anonymous person, he just stood there and even took out a jug of wine from his sleeve, and blocked those passing sword lights with just the pouring and spreading out of his fists. Moreover, the fist intent of this Ascension Realm perfect cultivator and stopping martial artist, upon closer inspection, there are as many as 10 layers. After that, there were 2 Daoist rituals. The number of sword lights in Beijing decreased sharply in turn, but they were even more sharp. Just after handing over the sword 3 times, Li Jiu will return to its original appearance in the gap before handing out the next sword. When the 72 waiting sword formation opened, 72 Beijing stood on the same ground, trapping the heavy-eyed teenagers in the center of the large formation, holding swords in one hand, pointing at the Li Jiu 72 sword lights. The snow-white long dragon intertwined with thunder and lightning slammed on Li Jiu's body, causing the latter to turn into a large pool of golden light that melted flesh and blood on the spot, but the golden light was intertwined with countless threads of threads. After that, Beijing's sword attack sequence was step by step, so it was a little rigid, so it was more like a show. Compared with the previous youth with facial paralysis, Li Jiu, who had regained his true body again, became radiant in his eyes, staring at the white scene. Seeing this, Beijing laughed and said, "Yo, I'm so angry when I get a little drizzle on my body." Xiao Mo explained in a heartfelt voice. Although this Ligo is still in the ascension stage for the time being, its defense is so high that it can be roughly regarded as the 14 stages. The reason why Beijing is entangled with Ligo is that he wants to find and she can crack the unique swordsmanship of the people without borders. She needs to determine a path between the 2 kendos. In the end, she uses the truth to break the illusion, and uses an infinitely small mustard seed sword to cut through the infinite realm of Taishu. Or cover the phantom with some greater phantasm in the end. Eating the opponent just like the previous hand casting a net, is an example of Beijing's exposure in this kendo, and the reason why she imitated our formation so quickly in the final analysis, it is still with her. In addition, the swordsmanship avenue is compatible and she is now learning and using it. All this is just because Beijing wanted to accomplish a feat 10,000 years ago. Before she entered the 14th realm, she had to kill a 14th realm cultivator. Qin Pingon nodded. A brain like Beijing seemed to be qualified to enter the Summer Palace. Qin Pingon jokingly said, "Xiaomo Beijing, how do you know these secrets involving Daoist roots? Monsieur is very sincere with you." Xiao Mo's face was full of helplessness. "She didn't tell me, it's just that we have been dealing with each other for a long time, and the 2 sides know the bottom line." Qin Pingon suddenly asked, "Then my 2 flying swords of life, didn't they just become one of Beijing's excellent avenue foods?" Xiao Mo smiled and said, "She wouldn't dare." Qin Pingon laughed at himself. "The premise is that I don't get alone." Xiao Mo narrowed his eyes. Qin Pingon said angrily, "Just kidding, don't be so serious." Xiao Mo said, "I don't want to be her enemy unless I have to." Qin Pingon nodded and said, "That's right." Li Shixing looked into the distance and said, "Zhou is here to force the existence in the wild world to show up." Hearing this, Qin Pingon became worried and asked, "It stands to reason, shouldn't that being in the wilderness be opposed to this kind of behavior?" Once the 2 worlds collide, whether it is after a collision the 2 fairies brush past each other, leveling at least 1 or 2 continents, or they collide with each other in an incomparably huge depression and bounce off, or Howren and wilderness are just that. Bordering. No matter what the situation is for the landlords of the 2 worlds, it seems to be a situation that they absolutely do not want to see. Especially the 3rd situation, the worst, is like letting 2 landlords, who must protect 1/3 of their own acre of land, have no room for maneuver and fall into a situation where they meet by a narrow path and face off against each other. Of course, in this way the influence on the sacrament is the greatest. Obviously, after Zhou ascended to the sky, he regarded the ritual as the biggest hidden danger, and maybe Qin Pingon was only ranked 2nd. Dealing with Qin Pingon is just throwing a chess piece at Luopa Mountain. For Li Xing, he moved directly to a wild world. Qin Pingon knew that this so-called existence exists in every world, and it is the target of overpowering each other with the number 1 person in every world. Just like the colorful world, the little girl named Yuan Shao, that is, the direct disciple collected by Huang Ting in Taiping Mountain, the little girl is now practicing with Ning Yao. In the Qingming world, Qin Pingon guessed that it was the warrior of Leap Moon Peak. It was hard work. After all, after a few small chats, Lu Qin gave too much evidence. As for Haoran world, it is the boatman Zonghao who is rumored to be competitive with the most holy master. Qin Pingon even guessed that the neighbor who was killed by the most holy master and the neighbor who was killed by the most holy master, and who was arranged by later unofficial historians to be personally entered into the mountain by the most holy master. The person who killed someone with an axe was once the mystical being born from the manifestation of the vast world. Li Shixing shook his head and said, for Haoran's counterattack against the wild, the existence in the wild world must have felt a great hidden danger, so he would become extremely angry. Only speaking of the three worlds of Qingming, Haoran and Wilderness, you can probably guess that the suppression of such existences by Taoist ancestors is the most effective. Apart from the high Taoism, this is related to the root of Taoism and the pursuit of Taoism. The law is naturally related. The martial artist of Runyue Peak has worked hard, and he has not yet been able to enter the 11th realm of martial arts. This is because the Taoist ancestors deliberately relaxed the restrictions on him. Because of the most complicated ritual system in the world, the most holy master and that existence have a relationship with each other. It can be said that the power is like fire and water. As for the wild world, the great ancestor of Tuyue Mountain is only half a step away, and he has never been able to enter the 15th realm. It can be seen that this existence is the most among the three. Qin Pingon smiled bitterly and said, it's relatively the one who can fight the most. Li Shixing looked up and nodded, I believe this has something to do with Zhou Mi's plan. If he failed to leave the sky, his retreat would probably be to join the way with this existence and enter the 15 realms by virtue of this. Qin Pingon frowned and said, isn't this kind of existence extremely difficult to find and inexhaustible to kill? Li Shixing smiled, glanced at Qin Pingon and asked, do you have to kill? Qin Pingon was dumbfounded. Indeed, it is closed. On the battlefield in the distance, the sword light suddenly disappeared. Xiego pouted, it doesn't make much sense to make a little trouble. The key is to meet someone who doesn't fight back and doesn't fight back. Wu Ming waved his hand to disperse the lingering messy sword intent and said with a smile, Bai Jing, you're done with your anger, are you sure you want fight? Li Jiu's face was pale and he remained silent. Bai Jing, a madman wasted away hundreds of years of Taoism. Xiego twitched the corners of his mouth. Bai Hejing Xie Hegu, now my name is Mei Hua. After all, it was Cultivator Haoran, and Yu Xian couldn't help but glance at the sword cultivator who was called Little Mo by the young hidden officer. Xiego stepped in front of Li Jiu and faced the boy face to face. She put her hands on her hips and stared. What are you looking at? Are you still not convinced? If she wasn't worried about Xiao Mo's misunderstanding, she would have smashed this facially paralyzed boy to quar. Li Shixing asked, do you know why Li Xing brought you and Mr. Mo together? Qin Pingon looked at Fu Shanlu in front of him and nodded, because I am half the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Li Shixing asked, are you really willing? Are you willing? Qin Pingon said, as long as the Confucian Temple credits Feishing City for this credit, I have nothing to regret. Half of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, this may have been the foundation of Qin Ping's enlightenment in the future. Xiao Mo reminded Bai Jing that he could return. Xiego suddenly turned his head and showed a bright smile at Xiao Mo. She no longer had the same knowledge as Li Jiu, and with a flash of sword light she immediately returned to the big formation. It turned out that at the very front, the holy Dharma image had already stretched out a hand and resisted the entire barren world. Sword of Coming Chapter 1004. With one hand against the wild world, Li Xing Fa Xiang retreated with one foot and stepped on one of the talisman mountains as a support point. Millions of golden talismans in the mountains like wildly growing vines, wrapped around Li Xing's ankles, and in an instant, the majestic Dharma that was almost broken was instantly restored to its original state and returned to its peak. Li Xing raised his hand again, spread his 5 fingers and a golden round mirror appeared. And the circles of inscriptions were the original characters of the sages and sages in the Confucian temple of the past dynasties. Every golden text that spins like a vortex is pulling the stars that are listed as constellations by later astronomical images, attracting countless rays of light coming from afar and merging into the vortex. At the same time, from Haoran world, there are still long golden lines rising into the sky, drawing arcs. Each arc composed of words is a whole book of sages. It was just such a contact, and the turbulent wind in the sky suddenly swayed like huge waves overlapping each other layer by layer. Xing Juzhong and his group in the big array felt the violent shaking of the sky and the earth. If Qin Pingon was not possessing the physique of a terrifying martial artist, I am afraid that it is only a collision like this, surrounded by the surging qi machine. As the host of the grand formation, it has already fallen. There is also the savage monster on the side who is standing on the wall. Because there is no formation support, almost all of them are unstable. Today's Earth Immortal Qi practitioners, if they are on the avenue outside the sky face the tide, it is estimated that they will have no ability to resist, and they will die in an instant and disappear completely. Utu's behavior is more down to earth. He doesn't want to waste his spiritual energy and kill his magic weapon, so he goes directly behind Anonymous and Li Jiu, who are standing side by side. The rest of the ancient great demons followed suit, and they stood like geese in an instant. The old Taoist priest with the bamboo crown, whose name is Shanjun, no longer rides the white deer but stands on the back of the mount, climbs high and looks into the distance, constantly waving the dust, slightly deflecting the constant stream of wind blowing his face. Li Go is the one with the highest defense among the big demons, so even if he is standing at the front of the geese array, his figure still remains motionless, but the two sleeves of his robe are hunting. Li Gu, who had a deep relationship with this scholar in the ancient times, had the most interactions, so after 10,000 years, seeing that little master again, Li Gu's mood was also the most complicated. Anonymous shook the jug in his hand and sighed sincerely, as expected of the little master. This time, in resisting the barbarous world, although Li Xing has borrowed strength but under a collision, it is only the law that tends to collapse and the real body has not yet been used. This shows the tenacity of Li Xing Dao body. This short man, whose attacking strength is still higher than Jianxiu Baijing, believes that he is the righteous saint, can't fight and is not enough to watch. Although the two sides were in hostile camps, it did not hinder his admiration for the saints in the slightest. Li Gua asked in a heartfelt voice, "How strong is this collision? Can you estimate it?" Anonymous thought for a while, being hit head-to-head by a world, assuming that it is a confrontation between two pure warriors. What is the upper limit? It is hard to say. As for the lower limit, I still have a few points. At least it must be a slap of Daoist's strength. Or is it the superposition of several strikes by the soldier of the military? This is only the lower limit of Anonymous estimate, and the lower limit is far from the upper limit, and there may be a big gap. After a lapse of 10,000 years, seeing Li Xing's means of blocking the road with his own eyes, Guanyi said with a wry smile, "If it weren't for the presence of Master Bai Zhe, who could stop the little master from killing him in the wild world?" Li Jiu said indifferently, "Bai Zhe is not the only one in the wild world." Guanyi shook his head and said, "Fei Ran? Shujin, how many of them are Zhou Qingao? Still too young." Anonymous raised his chin, "Look over there, the Lord has appeared." Guanyi tried her best to use her eyesight, coupled with the use of an ancient secret technique. She was able to pass through the disturbance of the chaotic celestial phenomena, and finally found that there were two monks in the unremarkable wilderness in a hinterland of the wild world. Mountains, one station and one sitting. In addition to Bai Zhe, there was an unfamiliar face, a thin girl with a withered appearance. She was sitting on the ground looking up at the holy saint. For some reason the girl is like a tattooed exiled prisoner. Someone stabbed a word on her cheek with an awl, which is the word burn in ancient golden inscriptions. When Bai Zhe found the girl, she called herself Sundial. To be precise, it was because she didn't deliberately hide her traces, which meant that she took the initiative to show up, which made it easy for Bai Zhe to see her. Otherwise, her existence, as long as she consciously avoids the exploration of the great monk, even if the patriarch of the three sects wants to find traces in his own world, he is like a mortal master, looking for a silent mosquito in a room full of groceries fly. She and Bai Zhe communicated in an old saying, "Aren't you going to take such a good opportunity?" As long as Bai Zhe is willing to take the opportunity to target Li Xing, it may even force the latter to scatter before the patriarch of the three sects. Bai Zhe shook his head and said, "As long as Li Xing doesn't take advantage of it and returns to the wild world, there is no need for me to take action. Once Li Xing uses the power of the collision to send a part of it to the mountains and rivers in the wild world, there will be countless broken places." Sundial frowned slightly, obviously not understanding Bai Zhe's choice. She shook her head. "As long as you are a Qi practitioner, no matter what your personality is, who doesn't want a higher level, why did you take the initiative to be that exception?" In her opinion, Bai Zai and Li Xing are also one of the candidates for the 10 heroes of the ancient times. Once the founders of the three sects dissipate, since Qin Qing of the Great Wall of Sword Qi is dead, Mr. Xianxia seems to have never wanted to reach the top of the realm. Then only Bai Zai and Li Xing are left, and they have the opportunity to compete for the throne of the number one person in the world. Don't get me wrong, I didn't do it because of my friendship with Li Xing. Bai Zai explained with a smile. You were born at the beginning of the wild world, so you don't know the temper of this little master. It really irritates him, just as you think. Even if you force Li Xing to disperse directly and don't said that before this, the territory of the wild world is destined to be smashed. There are holes that cannot be sewed up. The monsters on the earth have suffered heavy casualties, and Li Xing will definitely choose half to scatter in Howren and half in the wild. I may be fine. The impact is not particularly big, but you and the entire wild world will have a long period of bleak years. After that, all the Qi trainers who practice mountain climbing will be defeated by the new heavenly Tao after the sacrament. Bear an invisible restraint. Another consequence is that Li Xing is more ruthless and all the Tao is scattered in the wild. Then the ascension realm of Li Guan Guan Yi. If you want to join the 14 realms in the future, the difficulty will skyrocket. The threshold has become higher. Sundial tilted his head and became even more puzzled. In this case, if Li Xing is really as selfless as the legend, then it would be better to just scatter the Tao in the wild. Is it not the favorite thing for scholars to do to benefit the world by giving up one person? Bai Zai is like a schoolmaster who is preaching to an ignorant Meng Tong, and he patiently explained to Sundial again. First of all, he is in harmony with the rites and sages of Howren in the right time and place. The influence of the world is also very great. Qi practitioners and ordinary masters, up and down the mountain no one can escape. The entire vast world will experience an immeasurable turmoil in the next 100,000 years. Reshaping the ritual system is as difficult as going to the sky. Compared with the secular dynasties which are only on the map, it is 10 times more difficult. Secondly, on the surface, the rituals and saints are definitely going to be scattered in the short term. Wilderness suffered a big loss. In the early and mid-term of this battle, it was completely impossible to fight, and it would only be defeated step by step. Maybe most of the territory will fall into the hands of Howren, but as long as it is during this period, whether it is on the mountain or down the mountain. We have always been resisting in the wild, which has resulted in continuous battle losses and casualties on both sides, especially a group of great monks like Guan Yi. Every time one is killed in battle since I have left the Xianxia Tower in the vast Middle-earth, I can no longer refuse. With the arrival of these real names, my cultivation realm will continue to improve steadily, and the final result is that no matter whether I want to or not, I will be forced to enter the 15th realm. The biggest beneficiary and possibly the only one, is the meticulousness who only needs to stand by in the sky. It's like a dice on a chessboard. Use Savage Bai Zai to exchange for Howren rights. As for the chaos that caused the two worlds in the process of exchanging the pieces, presumably Zhou Mi will only be happy to see it succeed. Even if all the pieces on the chessboard are taken away in a chess game, as long as the chessboard is still there in the future, the world will be careful. The big deal is to replace 2 cans of brand new chess pieces. There are hundreds of trillions of lives in the world, whether they are humans or monsters, they are insignificant to Zhou Mi. The sundial asked the biggest question in his heart. Bai Zai, why didn't you want to take over the wilderness during that riverside discussion 10,000 years ago? If Bai Zai himself is willing to become the master of the world, it stands to reason that no one can stop this matter. Bai Zai can take the initiative to give his real name and passively confiscate his real name so that he can fully enjoy his success, even more qualified than today's Zhenxiu, the former ancestor of Tuyue Mountain, who is more qualified to enter the 15th realm and become a member of the wild world. Host. Bai Zai was silent for a moment with a bitter expression on his face. The Tao is not in harmony. Once I join the Savage Road, due to the nature of the Savage Demon Clan, I will eventually be devoured by this world. The secret plan of the early rise will appear, and no one can stop the flowering of this trend. The entire wild world, at most 3,000 years, will become more and more barren, and the spiritual energy of heaven and earth will be gathered in a small group on the top of the mountain. In the hands of Qishur, at that time the other Bai Zai, either involuntarily or according to his own heart, may really lead a dozen or so cultivators from the 14 wilderness realms and more than 100 ascension realm cultivators to frequently harass other worlds, and must cooperate with the rest. The 3 worlds grab more soil and life. In fact, before the riverside discussion, Bai Zhe had begged Daozu to help make a deduction. The general result is that a group of monks from the 14th realm, including the patriarchs of the three religions, had to join forces to destroy the wilderness. And this kind of annihilation is a simple literal meaning: there will be no wild world in the world. All the world was severely damaged, and the remnants of the ancient gods who were hidden in the outer world and reincarnated in the human world were resurrected. I can't suppress the ghosts, I can't restrain the gradually growing outer demon. Sundial sighed. It always seems to backfire like this. Bai Zhe smiled and said, that's why we have to cherish the beauty in our hearts more and more. She smiled. It's like what a scholar would say. In any case, getting along with Bai Zhe is much easier with Zhou Mi. Bai Zhe squatted down, grabbed a handful of soil, and shook his palm lightly. Countless broken particles suspended in the palm of his hand, and the extremely fine soil particles remained motionless one by one. Bai Zhe then stretched out his hand and picked up a small pebble, and gently placed it among the dirt particles. In the process, a considerable number of debris particles had been squeezed out. The sundial turned to look at him, wondering what Bai Zhe meant. Bai Zhe said, those who cultivators pursue freedom have only two paths to take. One is to be in it, with a high realm like a stone, which seems to be able to gather or disperse the soil particles around him at will. With the slow movement of the stone, with the stone as the foundation, it gradually absorbs the debris of the soil, as if the soil is piled up into a mountain which is getting bigger and bigger. At the same time, the surrounding soil particles began to be forced to move, and the trajectory was disordered. Some were attracted by the rotation of the stones, and some were continuously squeezed away. The movement of the small particles like water ripples expanding outwards. Finally, the originally static debris above Bai Zhe's palm, together with the outermost soil debris that seems to be located on the boundary of heaven and earth, all began to move along with it. It is said that the mind is fluctuating and the mind is the most uncertain. In fact, the only thing in the world that has the opportunity to achieve absolute stillness is the mind of the Tao. Bai Zhe twisted the stone again, held it in the palm of his hand, raised his arm, bent his fingers and twisted it gently, crushed all the soil that wrapped the stone and fell back over the palm of the other hand, and then only threw the stone towards in the distance. The second kind of pure freedom, that's it. The existence of the stone itself has nothing to do with this world. Bai Zhe suddenly asked, how did Zhou Mi find you in the first place? Sundial carved a sad expression, obviously still a little distracted. Palpitation, she hesitated for a moment but gave a vague answer. I have been waiting for the rabbit 16 times. All of which have been successful and I can't escape. The Hall of Heroes, which can only have a place on the throne, and Tuiyue Mountain were once the cages that imprisoned her clone, or to be more precise, the God Lord. After all, their true bodies are the whole world. This kind of imprisonment is a bit like detaining a part of the soul of a Qi trainer. It can only lead to her incomplete Tao, but it cannot be completely suppressed, let alone killed. The only demise of their existence can only be the complete disappearance of a world, such as the complete collapse of a world, the death of all living beings and no life. The first time he got out of trouble was when Daozu rode an ox into the pass and visited the Hall of Heroes built by the great demon Chuxing, and he was able to escape from the bottom. In return, he only needs not to form an alliance with the great ancestor of Tuiyue Mountain. After that, he resolved by himself, reincarnated many times and hid for many years. But he was finally found by that careful who took her back to Tuiyue Mountain. As the wild world becomes more and more stable, in fact her cultivation has been greatly improved compared to the first time she was arrested. Right now she was thrown to the ancestor of Tuiyue Mountain, who had never been able to enter the 15th realm. Therefore the second time he got out of trouble, it was the last hidden official Jiankai of the Great Wall of Sword Qi to hold Yueshan. Jian Xiufiren, the new co-owner of the world, was secretly instructed by Zhou Mi, asking her to fulfill the contract she made in the early years. She needs to create a vortex of time somewhere in the wild, and she must ensure that there are two branches of the long river. Every immortal mansion on the mountain that stabilizes the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and every noisy city below the mountain, is an invisible ink torture to her existence. Therefore, the more deeply rooted the mountain dojo and those dynasties with prosperous national power, the more like sores full of pus on her body. Even if there is a Sword Qi Great Wall that has been divided into 10,000 years, and the old blind man of the 14th realm, who has been divided into 100,000 mountains from the wild world's mountains and rivers, Even this is equivalent to being cut off 2 avenues, as long as that Zhou never interfered. The 4 worlds in the early years Sundial's previous life should have become the most powerful existence and even had the opportunity to take the lead in the 15 realms and completely regain the authority of the world. But because at the beginning of their birth, the fundamental meaning of coexisting with heaven and earth is a kind of must maintain the purity of self, so they naturally reject the exchanges between the 2 worlds. Therefore, even if Zhou, who was known as Tongtian Laohu, promised her that as long as the 2 sides cooperated, she could guarantee that she would eat the comrade of Hauran, and she would be able to grow and broaden her own avenue. She was skeptical about this, and she was still worried about falling into the embarrassing situation of being too high or not. Probably because of her wandering and not being decisive enough. In the end, she was thrown by Zhou to Tuyue Mountain and locked up. The ancient heaven, and she has been reduced to the field as it is today. Back then, on the way to Tuyue Mountain together, the man in the Confucian t-shirt with the lettering on her cheek smiled and said, "Together there are 2 benefits, and if you divide there are 2 harms. The reason is simple, but you don't believe it in your heart. There's nothing you can do about this, but believe me, you will definitely regret it in the future. It's a pity that people have different hearts and minds. Since ancient times they have never lost the distance between heaven and earth. The biggest difference between the demons is Zhou's departure has emptied out a lot of heritage in the wild world, especially the loss of top combat power, which has far-reaching effects. For example, there are only a few of the 14 old thrones left. Moreover, Lu Cha and Yang Ji were also detained by the Confucian temple. The only big monsters who really returned to the wilderness alive were Zhou Xian, the ancestor of moving mountains, and Fei Fei, the new owner of Ziluo. The rest were either killed in battle, eaten by Zhou, or disappeared without a trace. One person exploits the thin world and one person grows himself fat. This is the top, middle and bottom 3 strategies that Zhou and the great ancestor of Tuyueshan openly and honestly made in the early years. In the current situation they belong to the unsavory bottom strategy, but it is the best strategy for Zhou. If it wasn't for Bai Ze's return to the wilderness, he would wake up Bai Jing, the ancient monsters, and fill a certain vacancy. Otherwise, Hauran world, relying on those few fairy strongholds, believes that the speed of advancement can be described as overwhelming. Li Xing stepped on the talisman mountain, and stretched out his hand to block the wild world again and again, as if he was turning the bow again and again. Because of the holy saint blocking the way, the momentum of the wild world on the established trajectory gradually slowed down. Li Xing is a huge Dharma image compared to a world. It is really like the size ratio of a human to a building. It is only said that the disparity between the 2 figures is not so small that it is a scorpion that shakes a tree or a man's arm is a car. But after all, it still makes bystanders look at it and tremble with fear. No matter what camp they are, they can't help but have a common question: can they really stop it? Zhou Xian was thrilled to see that he built a house. The amount of wood and masonry was used. In fact, not to mention the word practical, in fact it can be big or small. It's just that the sacred image in front of it is like a precision instrument that has been carefully calculated and rebuilt. If the space is too large, it will be unstable and it will easily fall apart after a few collisions. Even if the image can be scattered and gathered again and again, after all. Every time Li Xing retreats, the fairy will get closer and closer to the orderly operation of the vast world. If the law is too small, the contact area with the wild world will not be enough, although it is very likely to pierce the wall of the fairy and make the wild world. There are countless broken mountains and rivers, but in this way the rules of the 2 worlds will be confused, which will lead to Bai Ze's intervention, which will evolve into a battle between Li Xing and Bai Ze. Whether the whole world is bordered, naturally it is still the snipe and muscles fighting for the fisherman's profit, pulling one hair and moving the whole body, and the sage takes the lead in dispersing, which leads to variables in the evangelism of the most holy teacher. And the change of the most holy teacher will lead to affecting the dispersal of the other 2 patriarchs of the 3 sects. In the end, the patriarchs of the 3 sects banned the new ancient heaven as expected, and the variables were even greater. Lu Yen sighed. The reason for such a shackled situation was due to careful planning. As a result, only half of Li Xing's real enemies were wild and half of Li Xing's own set of rules. Otherwise, Lu Yen had been out of the sky and had personally seen the true peak state of Li Xing. The ancient gods who were hidden in the outer world before, led by the armored people, tried to enter the Hauran world. Like a jewel, protected by Li Xing with one hand, The reason for such a world of difference is that Lixing wants to block the wild world without involving the Howren ritual system. Lixing must be equivalent to taking himself out of Howren. This move is second only to dispersal. Li Shixing has seen the signs and is a little relieved. As long as Bai Zhe does not enter the game, it will not be the worst result. To a certain extent, Bai Zhe and the existence that symbolize the manifestation of the great Tao of the wild world. Both parties are working together with Lixing to try their best to achieve the result that the well water does not violate the river water. He stretched out his finger to the wild world and explained to Qin Pingon. Except for the first impact of Lixing blocking the wild world, it is like a slight earthquake and all sentient beings in the wild can realize that something is wrong and they will feel a little dizzy, but after that Bai Zhe and that existence teamed up to form a formation. It was like adding a large formation to the wild world. After the ceremony, the attack did not touch the wild land, and a buffer boundary with a length of more than 100 miles appeared. As far as the world is concerned, apart from those great monks on the mountain with a keen sense of consciousness, in fact, this vision of heaven and earth has not been noticed. Qin Pingon finally understood why it was sooner or later that Zhou Mi chose to take action at this time. Just like when Qin Pingon met Yuan Yu and the three of them by chance on a night cruise, the three of them were responsible for cooperating with the Confucian temple inspection and re-establishing the standards for time, weight and length of all things, which must have been made by the Confucian temple. Out of the initial thing of weights and measures, and it must be that Lixing has accepted a few fundamental rules that have been embodied and integrated into his own avenue. The ferry boat in the wild world begins to step into the green road, outside the sky. Zheng Juzhong stood at the highest point of the Liuli pavilion and silently calculated. In his heart lake, there were originally 2 light drawn by nearly 100 rays of light. There were not only the shortest trajectory in a straight line, but also a very large arc. The farthest route and the green road, outside the sky chosen by the big demon Chusheng belongs to the kind of very inconspicuous route. Zheng Juzhong glanced at Qin Pingon who nodded in response. In Qin Pingan's heart lake, there is a complete trajectory of the green road that was filled by Zheng Juzhong. At the same time, there is also a picture of the situation in the wild world. There are a few dazzling lights on the map. It is the gathering place of the vast world in the wild. At the same time, Zheng Juzhong also helped Qin Pingon to solve a mystery in his heart. Although Qin Pingon has been deliberately refraining from understanding the war situation in the wild after returning to Hao, he always felt a little strange, that is, the Confucian temple should seek stability again. Howren Xianxia, which has several Guishu ferry as strongholds, seems to be too slow in terms of expansion and advancement speed. Can even be said that it is as slow as a staggering old man, not a young and strong man in armor. So far in the wild world, there has never been such a large-scale battle between the two armies on the battlefield. Apparently the Confucian temple was in a secret formation. It is possible that all the army monks on the top of the mountain, including the Dragon Tiger Mountain Great Celestial Master Zhao Tianlai Huolongzhenren and all the Ascension Realm monks have been acting as coolies for these years. It's no wonder that the most holy master was in the town demon building and asked Qin Pingon strangely, "If you were careful, how would you deal with the holy saint?" After getting the answer from Qin Pingon, the most holy teacher didn't seem to be too surprised. The talisman mountain that Lixing stepped on, and the countless golden talismans in the mountain were completely dimmed. Reaching out again and again to resist the collision of the wild world, and then turning the bow a little bit, the price Lixing paid for this was the condensed degree of that Dharma image. Gradually turned to sparse, just like the use of a painting scroll from a heavy brush dipped in ink, to a light ink stroke and finally withered ink. The ferry that followed the green road and slammed into the vast world, the trajectory has already shifted visible to the naked eye. Every time Lixing made a shot, there would be a sound like a big bell and a big lu outside the sky, which was deafening, and circles of Dao Qi ripples rippled in the endless Taishu realm. Just because the distance between the ripples is too short, even the big monsters like Guan Yi need to mobilize their own life objects to stabilize the heart of the Tao. Hu too was a little gloating. Yin smiled. "Poor little master, can you only stand and be beaten like this? Why is it like a blacksmith making iron? It's too laborious." Thinking back to the past, how high-spirited the little master among the scholars, remembered that there was a very old senior demon who was still a sword cultivator, and somehow provoked the little master. Killed, there was a monster monk at that time, and the realm and means were not bad, but no one dared to help, but took the initiative to retreat far, Just watch the little master leave with a head. Before leaving, the little master also said 3 words with the group of onlookers: don't collect the corpse. Among the spectators at that time, there were Hu Tu and Zhou Xian, who was lucky enough to win the title of the ancestor of moving mountains in later generations. It is true that no one dares to collect the corpse, otherwise it is not so much to help collect the corpse, it is actually tantamount to picking it up. After all, the mutilated corpse of a cultivator at the peak of the ascension realm of the demon race is still a well-deserved treasure mountain, which can be used for refining, except for that a corpse actually has a Daoist meaning in it. If it is refined in time, it is equivalent to adding one or even several ancient Taoism techniques out of thin air. The body of the monster that finally turned into a majestic mountain did not become an owner until the riverside discussion, dividing up several worlds and assigning the location to the wild world. In the end, Zhou Xian successfully took it into his hands, and this old ancestor who moved the mountain turned the entire mountain range containing a kendo into a long sword. Hu Tu smiled a bit more intensely. I really didn't expect that in the 10,000 years we're not here, there will be a meticulousness in the wild world. It can make this once invincible little master so aggrieved and happy just watching. He feels comfortable. But to be careful, Hu Tu still used his hand to isolate the world when he was sarcastic. Hu Tu was inexplicably hit by an elbow and flew out thousands of miles in an instant, causing his entire nose to collapse. Hu Tu didn't hesitate at all, and he didn't have time to say thank you to the nameless person. Like casting a huge net on the earth, those black smoke swarmed wildly into the wild world. A talisman hovered over the place where Hu Tu was standing. Looking at the height, it was just near the neck of Hu Tu's day. This talisman has no so-called talisman paper, only a golden word for /. Several big monsters in the vicinity all know the power of this talisman. Once Hu Tu is hit by the talisman, it will take root in the real body, especially the real name of the monster who will entangle Hu Tu's day. Anonymous put away the jug in his hand, smiled and clasped his fists, and apologized to the Mr. Xianxia from afar. For a while I forgive my sins. For the sake of drinking together, don't care. A slashing word instantly turned into 8 straight golden long lines, and finally twisted around each other to form a rope, and flew back to the sleeve of the young monk. Anonymous showed a dazed look. A long time ago, although there were infighting between great cultivators of various races that could be divided between life and death, in general the top cultivators, no matter what kind of avenues they were. How are they from different backgrounds? In fact, their relationship is not tense, and there is even a relaxed atmosphere unimaginable in future generations. Li Go can be regarded as half an anonymous disciple of the most holy master. And the nameless person who punched Hu Tu to save the next catastrophe is also familiar with Mr. Xianxia, who sacrificed the character of beheading, and the Bixiao cave master and Lua Baotan. In ancient times they were familiar with them, and Xianxia fought side by side many times, and jointly fought against the gods who patrol the earth and wantonly kill the immortals. On the wild land, on the top of the mountain, the sundial carved with the appearance of a young girl raised a thin hand and lightly beat her heart. It was the great formation that Howren had set up in several places in the wild that opened, which made her feel a pain in her heart. Bai Zhe stretched out his hand and patted the girl's arm, and only then did Sundial's brows stretch a little. When Hu Tu was about to land in the wild world and secretly delighted, Bai Zhe shook his head helplessly. You said that it is not good for you to provoke anyone, but you want to provoke that Mr. Xianxia. And the most confused part of Hu Tu is that he especially shouldn't return to the earth so quickly. The soil of the wild world is not the soil of the human world. Just after gathering tens of thousands of black smoke, when the toes were about to touch the ground, this big demon was keenly aware that something was wrong, and it was only a tiny difference, so he immediately raised his feet, never thinking about the wild land around thousands of miles. All of a sudden, like a wave of water ripples, he wrapped Hu Tu's ankle in it. Hu Tu complained and tried another way to escape, but it was still in vain. He dragged his way up the mountain, and the next moment Hu Tu was horrified to find that he had come to the young cultivator. He swallowed, not knowing how to speak for a while. Mr. Xianxia said indifferently, "Don't apologize to Li Sheng?" Hu Tu's face turned ashen in an instant, but he quickly changed his face, squeezed out a smile and bowed to the holy saint in front of him. I was talking nonsense. I am here to apologize to the little master. You can imagine the feeling of being targeted by 2 great cultivators of the 14th realm. Bai Zhe looked up at the sky, hesitated for a while but still didn't speak. Who two should suffer once. Previously they gathered together in the Helyuo, and after discussing the matter they dispersed separately. Among them the old Taoist Zhuguan Hu Tu and the old woman secretly acted without authorization. In the spring of this year, they walked together to go to the border of the ferry of the Sunfall Guishu. Self-confessed that with the strength of the three of them, not to mention sweeping the ferry, why not come and go freely? As a result, on the way there, we agreed to kill hundreds of thousands of soldiers at the foot of Mount Hauran casually so that the younger generation of Firen could see it, but halfway the old Taoist Zhuguan did a calculation and looked at the hexagram. In fact, he had already started to murmur, and after he forgot the 2 hexagrams, his mood became more and more solemn, but for the sake of face he continued to accompany Hu Tu and the old woman on the road. After all, the old Taoist Zhuguan was cautious, so he first caught 2 monk of the demon race, the Jade Pure Realm and the Immortal Realm. First throw the Jade Pure Realm as a bait to be in charge of the formation, where the garrison of a certain great dynasty in the vast Middle Earth and Divine Continent has not yet shot. Was found traces and was intercepted on the spot. After making a few messes, let the only remaining Immortal Realm demon clan specifically kill those arrogant scouts and some small-scale cavalry troops, which is indeed very effective, and also killed several ants-like so-called cultivators who accompanied the army. Under the derivation of the Taoist priests, this Immortal Realm demon clan, like a puppet, is like an assassin, deliberately hiding his cultivation and realm, wandering around to kill those dynastic troops stationed in remote areas, specializing in killing those generals under the mountain and their side. The cultivator of the army. Almost a month later, this fairyland demon clan just sneaked out, and was killed by an old real person wearing an embroidered dragon robe with 2 fire dragons thousands of miles away. The more troublesome thing is that the 3 of them, the old Taoist bamboo crown, almost fell into a circle, really only a little bit. The bamboo-crowned old Taoist priest relied on the omens of a half-refined ancient divine weapon to retreat decisively and quickly. As expected, as soon as the 3 of them left their front feet, they were hiding their positions, and then a number of great monks appeared on the back feet. Except for the one who is said to be from Beiju Luzhou, the real fire dragon, there is a sword-carrying Taoist priest in a yellow-purple vestment, 2 swordsmen and a powerful female warrior. Aside from the Hauran top experts who showed up, the old woman also relied on the subtle ripples of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to keenly discover a few hidden breaths on the way. The sundial asked, "Why does Mr. Sanshan Jiuho stand so firmly on Lixing's side?" Bai Zhe smiled and said, "Actually earlier the 2 of them had an average relationship. I even persuaded them to fight. Some friends hit it off right away, like drinking strong wine such as Bai Zhe and the Little Master. Some friendship, but it is a pot of wine that needs to be simmered slowly, that is Lixing and Mr. Sanshan Jiuho. After the battle of ascending to the sky, in the ancient years when the world was initially determined and gradually tended to be peaceful, about 7 or 8,000 years ago, Lixing once made an attempt and specially invited Mr. Sanshan Jiuho to come out and make a plan for the Hauran world together. New gift. The affairs of the world, in the final analysis, are nothing more than divided into celestial affairs and underworld affairs. Obviously, Lixing and Mr. Sanshan Jiuho are respectively responsible for these 2 matters. So there is the latter's monument to declare Yin Ming, and there are 7 big characters engraved on the monument: "Peace to the world, kill the stubborn." And Lu Chen also compared those ghosts and immortals hiding on the Yinming Road, similar to the great monster Wuti in Xianxia City, as stubborn people. Obviously, it is used to target the world to create haunts, especially those who have attained Taoism and immortals. But in fact, during that long period of ancient times, Mr. Sanshan Jiuho had an excellent relationship with the first ghost cultivator in the world, who was one of the 10 heroes of that year. It can even be said that, to a certain extent, Mr. Sanshan Jiuho is the true guardian of all ghosts and ghosts in later generations. Zheng Juzhong, Li Shixing and Fu Luyuxuan said a word at the same time. After a while, the 3 of them deduced their own mental calculations and came up with 3 results, which are the approximate locations of the horizontal and vertical intersections of the 3 different latitude and longitude lines in the wild, and there are differences between them. On this basis, Zheng Juzhong performed the calculus alone. Soon in the wild world, there was a lack of an aide who seemed to have no name but was the true master of the city. Bai Zhe narrowed his eyes. Most of his attention today was actually on the Lord of Baidi City. Bai Zhe suddenly said in a heartfelt voice, "Dial, Immediately find out the exact location of Hu Tu's hidden real body. The sundial hesitated for a moment, but for the sake of Bai Ze's help earlier he still nodded. Outside the sky, Li Xing didn't turn his head, just held the wild world with one hand, smiled and said, "The real body is not there, the sincerity is not enough. After all, it is an ancient great demon that has lived for more than 10,000 years, and his life-saving skills will definitely not be too bad. The killing power is not enough, run for your life to make up." Hu Tu bit his head and said, "I really don't dare to meet Li Xing with my real body." Li Xing nodded and said, "I said something honest." Hu Tu's voice trembled slightly and said a thin-skinned remark. "If it's all right, I'll leave. I don't dare to delay Li Xing's shot." Li Xing smiled and suggested, "Why don't you try it? Save standing and talking without back pain." Without waiting for the nonsense words to decline the invitation, his heart was shocked. It turned out that it was Bai Zishian who called out his real name and said solemnly, "Don't give up this avatar directly, hurry up." Just before Hu Tu made any movement he was beckoned by Li Xing, and his entire body swept forward like lightning. Li Xing stretched out his hand and grabbed the head of Hu Tu's clone. With a little force he forced the wild monster to show its real body, and then casually pressed it against the wild fairy. As soon as they collided, Hu Tu's clone came into contact with the wild world, like a blood-splattered flower blooming between the cliffs in the mountains. Zheng Zhuzhong looked at the scattered blood spattered from a distance, bent his fingers, hooked gently, the blood condensed into a slender long line, fell into Zheng Zhuzhong's palm, shook his palm slightly, the blood turned into a bead, Zheng Zhuzhong's palm continued to spin. Another Baidi city lord on the wild land changed his route slightly and came to the door of a secret cave that was deeply hidden. This Zheng Ju put his together to make a sword art just like a knife-cutting tofu, breaking the layers of restrictions without deterring, just straightforward. When Hu Tu saw the smiling guy, the big monster's face was pale, and Zheng Zhuzhong, who seemed to be walking in the courtyard, punched through his chest with a punch, but there was another vision in an instant and Bai Zhe came to the two sides. On the side of the body he pressed Hu Tu's head with one hand and pushed towards Zheng Zhuzhong with the other, abruptly tore the two sides apart, then rolled up his sleeves. Bai Zhe put Hu Tu into his sleeves and left the secret realm of the cave together. Zheng Zhuzhong shook his wrist slightly, and the blood that was thrown off condensed into a bead in the air again, which was also collected into his sleeve. A moment later Hu Tu will at least fall. If Bai Zhe doesn't come, then there will be no more Hu Tu in the wild world. Zheng Ju meditated a few times in the center and smiled. "Mantises catch cicadas, but unfortunately your oriole is not very helpful. They fly too slowly." After the words were settled, Zheng Zhuzhong had just disappeared, and the figure of the big demon appeared in the secret realm. He looked around and snorted coldly. The old Taoist priest with bamboo crown tucked one hand into his sleeve and kept choking, and his expression became stiff in an instant and he laughed a few times. "Pindao won't stay here to watch the fun, come back first, come back first." Guan Yi let out a faint sigh, nodded and said helplessly, "Let's go together." As a result, the old Taoist priest with a sword on his back was about to bend down and pat his mount when he saw the white-robed man standing on the top floor of the Lioli pavilion smiling at him. The old Taoist was horrified. "What are you looking at me for? No injustice, no hatred, just staring at the poor road? Pindao provoked you to mess with you? It's just a pseudonym Wang Youwu, not a real stunner. You look at the official E beside Pindao." The guy who was said to be a giant in the world of magic seemed to have guessed what the old Taoist thought was actually quite absurd, so he said with a smile to the old man with the bamboo crown, "The official second is good-looking and easy to kill. You are ugly but hard to kill, you talk about it yourself. Look, I don't care who you look at. The surname is Jing, your mother's brain has a hole, do you think so?" Zhou Xian glanced at Zheng Zhuzhong in the Lioli pavilion, and then turned to look at the old Taoist priest with bamboo crown. For some reason he couldn't help but look at the young hidden official. Sword of Coming Chapter 1005. To the Gods. I saw Li Xing stepped on the two Fushan mountains and suddenly the Dharma was at least doubled in height. His feet drove the Fushan mountains as if walking in boots. Li Xing turned his side, but left the golden mirror made of natal characters in place. Like a soft but resilient wall that continues to block the way of the fairy, Li Xing then hits the wild world with his back, and the Lu River behind him is like a brand new track that has been relayed, diverting the original green road. Li Xing Fa Xiang leaned back, raised his feet one after another and stepped on Taishu again. The Fa Xiang leaned back a little bit, shifted the direction of the ferry boat, a little bit, and pushed the entire wild world into the Lu River waterway. The back of St. Li's gigantic Dharma image rubbed an incomparably splendid glazed brilliance with the entire barren world. Among the ancient demons who came to watch the show, only Li Go and Anonymous were left. Wu Ming couldn't help but took out the jug again, took a sip of wine and said with a hearty smile, "No doubt Bai Yujing, who is really invincible and invincible, will definitely not be able to beat the little master." Li Gu said, "Is there anything to be happy about?" Anonymous nodded and said, "You must be happy. This shows that over the past 10,000 years, no matter how many so-called geniuses and techniques, they are still not as high as our monks." Li Go said, "It can't be calculated like this. In the past 10,000 years, the little master has studied a lot of techniques." Wu Ming's face was strange, and after holding it for a long time he still couldn't hold it back. He raised his hand and patted the boy with heavy pupils on the head. "Do you know why you couldn't get along with that group of human race Taoists and scholars back then?" Li Gu said, "I can't speak." The little man smiled and said, "You know that. This man with no name and no surname, even without the real name of the demon clan, really had a good relationship with Mr. Sanshon Jioho back then, and could be regarded as half a friend and half a drinking buddy. Probably because of his loose nature he has few friends and not many enemies. Different from Bai Jing's method of killing the opponent as soon as he has a vengeance, the short man's several shots are all for his friends. Therefore the man regrets that Lu Cha, the sword repairer who failed to return to the wild, will become a new drinking friend." Bai Jing laughed so hard that although she had never seen the messed up end with her own eyes, she only guessed a general situation, and then she pretended to be sad and said loudly in a heartfelt tone, "Sadly heartbroken, teach people to be heartbroken. You're confused." The man laughed dumbly, turned towards Bai Jing, raised his hand and shook the jug in his hand. "Why didn't I know that you, Bai Jing, like to talk slander so much?" Bai Jing rolled his eyes and waved his hand, indicating that we are not familiar with each other, so don't get too close to me. My little Emo has a small mind. If Xiao Emo misunderstands me I will kill you. But if you are willing to give me the jug in your hand, we will be brothers and sisters in the future. This short man likes to listen to the sound of the wine swaying in the jug while drinking wine. The jug in his hand is actually one of the old ancestors of the later generations. Apart from the commemorative significance, because it is only a semi-finished product, the rank is not too high. Nowadays almost every one of the Earth Immortals has a square-inch object and a close-up object. It was originally from Lan Qi, one of the 10 richest people in the world, and she was the first to forge and refine the mountain utensils. It can only be said that the appearance of this type of object has a far-reaching and inestimable impact on the entire mountain pattern of later generations. It even greatly increases the chances of winning the battle of the cultivators in the original world. The man took a sip of wine, wiped the corners of his mouth, and had no reason to think of one of his few friends, the Mr. Sanshon Jioho, who told the truth after drinking. Let those Taoists who should not be forgotten be remembered by future generations for a long time, even if thousands of years have passed, even if they are only remembered by one person or a few people. Behind Li Xing, Mr. Sanshon Jioho finally made his move. He sacrificed a stack of talismans, and there were only 2 kinds of big talismans. With the characters of water, he rushed forward on the road in the wild world, cut a long river of time, interrupted the mutual traction between the ferry and the original trajectory of the green road, and then used the character of mountain. Walls were erected on both sides of the wild world and the Lu River, just like long embankments were built on both sides of the riverbed, so that the ferry boat could appear to fall downward, but actually rise uphill. At the same time, Mr. Sanshon Jioho began to use his natal supernatural powers to drive the mountains and mountains in the wild world. The Dadi mountains that were immediately blocked by the sundial and ordered to migrate by this young cultivator could only be confined to the boundaries around the strongholds in the vast world. On the top of one of the highest mountains on the other side of Shirwanda Mountain, there is a rickety old man with empty eyes. This old blind man, who does not even have a watchdog at his feet, is standing alone on the edge of the cliff, reaching out and rubbing the depression cheeks as if hesitating about something. The good disciple who opened and closed the door seems to be a sage of the academy now. However, the nerds in the Confucian temple are relatively stubborn, and they said something before which is not an example. It seems that by accumulating a new amount of merit to help the apprentice become a gentleman is hanging. And what he wanted to do with the few strokes on the merit book of the Confucian temple, after thinking about it, the old blind man thought it was meaningless, So he turned around and walked to his residence, passing by Li Huai's house, stopped, pushed open the door, and saw there were several pots of wine and a stack of books on the table, and Yumal was going to let his master read the books and drink them. In addition to driving the Lu River that looks like lichen spreads in the air, Zhou Xian is not idle. This great monk who exclusively owns the word Fu Lu is whimsical and powerful. He is trying to draw a talisman on the road of the Lu River, turning a part of the long river of time and using this to open a gate to help the ferry get farther and farther away from the established green road. The machine was exhausted, and Zhou Xian had to give up angrily. He did a quick mental calculation. The number of ways was right, but he was not prepared enough and was too hasty. If he was given enough time and refined a large number of talismans, he might be able to do it. There are 2 gates built in the sky in the outer world. The ferry boat enters through one gate and exits through the second gate in an instant, just like the return passages that connect the 2 worlds. Lu Yen shook his head and said with a smile, "Yu Daoyu's idea is good, but it is difficult to make it happen." Zhou Xian laughed. If you talk about any other Taoist context, it's easy to say you can talk a few more words, but fellow Taoist Chunyang and I discussed the talisman together, but there's really nothing to talk about. Although the edict was ordered together, most of the decrees were cancelled by the barbaric sundial. In addition to offering the 2 big talismans, Mr. Xianxia still has a magical power that presses the bottom of the box. I saw him raise his hands as if he were origami. He actually folded the long river of time behind Li Xing, as well as the 4 directions of heaven and earth, repeatedly, and then gently placed the paper kite on the luha. This kind of means of reaching the sky is like tying a knot on a piece of clothing. All the warp and weft threads of this piece of clothing are pulled to the knot to varying degrees. Then fold a large piece of the green path behind the wild world, and also fold out a paper kite. In the end, the 2 paper kite talismans, like 2 fish baskets with opposite openings, gradually closed, holding a giant fish in their pockets. This is a quack character that has been developed for a long time but first sacrificed. If Mr. Xianxia was a guest at Baiyujing Green City, Ko Ming and this senior asked for the knowledge of talismans, and finally created several great talismans including the Sanxian talisman. Then Mr. Xianxia also relied on this harmonious atmosphere to discuss Taoism, and got small gains such as the character Quan, which specializes in overcoming, dismantling and breaking all kinds of small worlds, of great monks between heaven and earth. Taoist Chunyang smiled knowingly, and fellow Daoist Lu from Baiyujing must have contributed a lot. It must have been when Mr. Xianxia and Headmaster Ko were sitting and discussing Taoism, Dao Yu Lu deliberately made a joke. Those who have attained the Tao are like slaughtering snakes, forgetting their body and shedding their shackles. Most of the practice is to cross the river and abandon the boat, get the fish and abandon the trap, go up the room and take the ladder. In fact, this kind of behavior has nothing to do with good or evil, and has no derogatory meaning or praise. It's just that the Daoist meaning of this big talisman of Mr. Xianxia is fundamental, and it's unique, just like an elder reminding the later generations of cultivators who are juniors, don't forget their roots. Or simply pierce a layer of window paper and directly tell those so-called monks on the mountain that the so-called Daoists today are far from truly attaining the Tao. Zhou Xian's eyes widened. How could Fu Lu play like this? Whether it's a big formation in the world or a small world, isn't it all without exception in the face of this talisman? After seeing this scene, Lu Yen observed it carefully, and seemed to understand something which was beneficial to his own swordsmanship. A woman in colorful clothes appeared beside Mr. Xianxia. Her clothes were swaying, her huge body was as big as a hanging moon, and her golden eyes were different from the coldness of the gods. Her eyes, face and attitude were all gentle and gentle, soft and very human-like. The true spirit of the world's talisman, her status and identity in the talisman is like the ancestral money of those kinds of immortal money. This is probably the root cause of the fact that Fu Lu Yushuan cannot fit into the 14 realms of Tao by relying only on the actual talisman. Not to mention the refining of tens of millions of talismans, no matter how many there are, Zhou Xian can't rely on this to prove the Tao. Just because of this road, the former sages have been sitting on the broken road, and the Ascension realm wants to enter the 14 realm, and the most afraid of walking is a single plank bridge that already has people on the other side of the bridge. For example, if there is Bai Yi, Suzi and Lu Qi will not be able to pass through the 14 realms of Wenyun and Dao. When Xian Du watched Sun Huaizhong, Xiao Imo was one step too late. If there is Wuzhou, Li Shou must reroute. This talisman's spirit, born of the manifestation of the Great Way, stands at the end of the riverbed of the Lu River, with a huge Dharma image, facing Li Xing and Mr. Sanshan. The talisman of a woman's appearance is like planting rice. Every green seedling inserted in the paddy field is the countless talismans she scatters into the outer space. Obviously, she wants to lay out a new green road, so that the ferry boat in the wild world can follow this trajectory and gradually move away from Haoran. Jing Juzhong shook his head. Li Shixing asked with his heart, "Mr. Jing, what's wrong?" Jing Juzhong said with a smile, "Even if the entire established Qing Dao is changed, as long as a new trajectory that truly fits the Dao is not created, it will still be futile. No matter how advanced the Dao of Mr. Sanshan is, he can use the method of talisman to reproduce it. All-encompassing, it is not enough to support the whole world's great Dao circulation, plus the reason that seniors don't seem to often set foot in the wild land, makes this road, although the rank is slightly better than the great demon Chuxing, it can be said the degree of sturdiness is somewhat inferior. Let's assume that Zhou has no backers, but don't forget that there is more than Zhou in that new heaven. Therefore, even if there is a new road that can be roughly regarded as following the rules, it is still not foolproof." Li Shixing continued to ask, "What would Mr. Jing do instead?" According to Jing Juzhong, even if Li Xing and Mr. Sanshan join forces, coupled with their stacked formations, it seems that there is still no surefire solution. Jing Juzhong shook his head and smiled, "It can't be me." While a stacked formation had not really touched the wild world, Qin Pingon tried to copy this temporarily unknown talisman in the Heart Lake, but to no avail. Only its shape is incomprehensible, and Fu Lu's shelf will soon be crumbling and collapse in an instant. After several attempts, it is such a bleak result. It's like the family is too thin, and you can only try to use the worst material of Huangxi talisman paper to carry the true meaning of a high-quality Taoist book. Of course it won't work. Then there is Qin Pingan's moon in the well. Due to the addition of 600 gold and copper coins, the rank has been improved. It can probably be called the moon in the well. It is a pity that the more than 700,000 flying swords are used come to set up. I really can't make time. Start a small stove. Qin Pingon immediately asked in his heart, "Xiao Mo, if I build the framework of this talisman, can you fill the veins with sword intent?" Xiao Mo shook his head and said, "I'm a layman in Fu Lu's business, I can't help you and you'll lose 1,000 miles. Even if you return to Haoran, if you can calm down and deduce it over and over again in the dojo, it's estimated that you will only be wasting your sun in vain. Precious time for cultivation." Looking at Bai Jing, Xiao Mo reluctantly said, "It might be better to replace Bai Jing to be the sun's helper." Qin Pingon had no choice but to give up. The young cultivator entered the stacking formation in an instant. "Master Qin Shan, temporarily change me to preside over this great formation, and you will prepare the backhand." In addition to relying on stacking formations to completely reverse the bow of the barbaric world and forcing it to step into a right track, laid out by talismans, it is also necessary for this young hidden officer to sacrifice a key sword in the way, interlocking and missing one. "Not possible." Qin Pingon nodded. Mr. Sanshan asked, "Do you know how to draw a sword?" Qin Pingon replied, "The younger generation reluctantly does it." Jing Juzhong heard the words and smiled playfully. Mr. Sanshan clearly noticed the strangeness of Jing Juzhong, and asked in his heart, "Mr. Jing has something to say?" Jing Juzhong smiled and said, "There is nothing to say. The original stacked formation was just like a duckweed leaf on the water." After Qin Pingon handed over the dominance of the large formation, Mr. Sanshan sat in it, and a talisman that did not lose to the holy sage appeared behind him. Times, but not the kind of dilution, but does not reduce the degree of condensedness of these second-class authentic dojos. Bai Jing grinned, let out a snort, and then gave an unbiased and fair evaluation. As soon as the expert made a move, he would know whether it was there or not. Qin Ping's placement was unheard of, but he just scattered his mind out of his true body. Looking at the edge of the bird world in the flying sword cage, he saw Mr. Sanshan, a Dharma image composed of countless talismans. In the end, many dragon veins meandering for thousands of miles. All the veins are gathered by the water characters. Several deists in the history of the world can see the waterway here, a head on the neck, and the scene in the mind is like a bright star. But it is not the Milky Way where Fulu Yuxun's path is located. It seems to be an accumulation of countless unknown constellations. The avenue is huge, incredible, beyond imagination. The matter was of great importance, and the young monk had to remind Qin Pingon again, I am only the abbot of the Great Formation, you are the Great Formation itself. I can only try to help offset the impact of the savage world against the overlapping formation. You wait until it is really unsustainable. At that time you don't need to support hard, just take back the 2 flying swords and leave enough strength to ensure that you can hand out that sword. In the view of Mr. Xianxia, Qin Pingon is not only the origin of this magnificent stacked formation, but also the shortcoming of this great formation. It's just that he can't insist that one age is the age of no confusion, especially for young Qi practitioners who are less than 30 years old. To be honest, even with a vision as high as Mr. 3 Mountains in 9 hours, it is quite difficult for Qin Pingon to achieve this step. In fact, in the previous calculation with Li Xing, there were 8 Howren candidates who were similar to Qin Pingon. Among them, there were 3 sword cultivators such as Qi Jinglong from the Taihui sword sect of Beiju Luzhou. There are many choices such as several people or 9 people working together, and there are more than 100 kinds of combinations. The final conclusion was that Qin Pingon was chosen alone. Either those choices with great risks and benefits are relatively the most wrong-free choices. Qin Pingon nodded. I won't make a swollen face as a fat man, I will definitely do what I can. The young cultivator took out 2 blue-purple talismans from his sleeves and handed them to Qin Pingon to introduce the purpose of the talismans. One is used to fix the soul, the other can stabilize the body and can be used at the same time. Don't use double talismans unless it is a last resort. We must pay attention to the timing and do not act impulsively. Once these 2 talismans are used too early, the human body and soul will be rooted in the middle of the flood like a pillar, just like a pure martial artist who is casted with a talisman and can only be beaten. If you fight back, you only need to look at to know what happens. It is like hitting a stone with an egg. Therefore, it is best to use it to heal your wounds immediately after removing the stack to stabilize your mind and body, so that your soul will not scatter outside your true body. It hurts the root of the road. Qin Pingon carefully put away the 2 priceless life-saving talismans. The whole wild world was sailing in that Lu River, and the rites of the holy Dharma had changed from the posture of leaning back against the ferry boat, to pushing the stern of the boat with both hands. The entire back of the sacred Dharma was consumed by the wild avenues into a pitch-black nothingness. This kind of loss of the avenues visible to the naked eye is immeasurable. For any Ascension realm or even a 14-realm cultivator, I am afraid they will be involuntarily feel despair. Mr. Xianxia 2 origami characters, together with the golden round mirror made of Sage's original characters, ensure that the ferry must travel within the Lu River. The talisman Zhenling, who is the maid beside Mr. Xianxia, is at the end of the Lu River, responsible for paving a new road, and has built a talisman road that is millions of miles long in the void outside the sky. The new road deviates from the green road, which creates a clearly visible arc. And Qin Pingan's stacked formation is just outside the top of the arc. Like a large formation of heavily armored infantry defending an elite cavalry army. After the ferry collided with it, it instantly tore open a hole in the cage and then slowly embedded into the stack. Suddenly there was a piercing sound like a blade slowly cutting the glass. Even outsiders like Anonymous and Li Jiu who enjoy the scenery from a distance have their scalps numb. Wu Ming hurriedly took a sip of wine to suppress his shock, stunned, and said, "It hurts a little bit to look at, let alone the person who is carrying it." Li Jiu glanced at the young hidden officer who was as small as a mustard seed, sitting cross-legged at the sky screen of the sword formation world, temporarily unable to see the slightest change in expression, holding his breath as still as a mountain. Wu Ming said with a smile, "I don't even frown, am a young man. It seems that our physique Qin Yingguan, a martial artist, is very reliable. It's just that I don't know who taught the boxing. So impressive. The same is true of standing and talking without back pain. This anonymous person can speak more than Hu Tuxuan can hear." Fu Lu Yushuan and Taoist Chunyang, who were sitting in the sun and moon of Zhou Xian, began to mend the hole respectively to prevent the bow from breaking through more barriers in the world too quickly. A savage world. A stacked formation like 2 flowing pills in a river, the former rolls away quickly, the latter is still, and the size is disparate, the place where the 2 touch is like grinding discs. Zheng Juzhong nodded lightly. The tenacity of the stacking formation was a bit better than expected. In fact, the Confucian temple must have prepared for the worst, that is, their group could not stop the fairy from outside the sky and eventually the two worlds collided. So Howren World's choice of the collision point is very interesting. Jing Juzhong guessed that the choice of the Confucian temple would be the Middle-earth Confucian temple. At that time the candidate to replace Qin Pingon will be the Jingsheng Shiping, who is equivalent to a 14th level monk in the boundary of the Confucian temple. The vast world, the Chinese Confucian temple. An old scholar was even more worried. Standing on the top of the steps of a pavilion, he couldn't bear to look at the outside world again. He hurriedly retracted his gaze, turned his head and said to an old friend who looked like a scholar beside him, "Brother Shiping, they all say dripping water. The kindness should be reciprocated by the gushing spring. Then the kindness of the gushing spring can't be reciprocated with water. It must not be like this." Jingsheng Shiping said helplessly, "How to care about this matter? The Confucian temple has its own interpretation. If it is true, Qin Pingon seems to have not asked for a place in the Confucian temple so far." The old scholar was not happy when he heard it, stomped his feet and said, "If you only care about things don't care, the world is going downhill, how can you be full of saints? Not to mention you and me, we are all scholars." Jingsheng Shiping became more and more helpless. "It's not like you don't know what happened to me, you can't help but I'm not official and I have to follow the rules." Due to his identity, Jingsheng Shiping really couldn't talk to anyone about any personal friendship. Even if he is in the Confucian temple, he does not participate in discussions. In fact, the old Xiuzai didn't want to be flattering, just to distract himself and chat a few words, lest he look like a sloppy young man. Walking into the pavilion, as soon as I sat down, I stood up like a fire on the buttocks, but resisted not moving to the pavilion and stretched my neck to look outside. Not still like the ants circling on the hot pan. The old Xiuzai began to mutter and babble, like a drunk man talking drunk at the table. After reading hundreds of thousands of sage books, you can't just pull out a piece of shit. The common man poops and urinates and he can fertilize the fields, and the scholars who have a bad mind will not catch the dog if he poops. Occasionally, good things and hard-working people will make the hard-hearted person soften. The cultivator, the continuation of life, the height and the length, lies in the depth of the traces of the world. Jingsheng Shiping sat on the side and listened silently, just got used to it. A stack of formations began to gradually crumble, and those broken flying swords fell between the heavens and the earth like a torrential rain. The golden-filled peak where Zhou Xian was sitting has completely dissipated, and the Liuli pavilion in the middle of Jingju also fell apart and exploded with a bang. The scene was gorgeous and radiant. A wild world turned the bow of the boat with an extremely subtle range, and slowly shifted to the trajectory laid out by the true spirit of the talisman. Li Xing Dharma extended a hand to offset some of the momentum for the stacking formation, and the dermis cheek on the side of the ferry boat wall was worn away by the wild world. Qin Pingon kept his eyes closed, sitting in the air with one hand on his abdomen, palm facing up, one hand clenched on his knee, his bones trembled with golden stones and a golden fire flowed out. Mr. Sanshan Jiuho, the abbot of the Grand Formation, was a little relieved, and constantly adjusted the many subtleties of the Grand Formation. He was no longer as constrained as before, and was able to exert the power of this stacked formation to a greater extent. Because the young hidden officer made an unexpected move, his real body is like a mountain, although his soul is like 1,000 flowers in the mountain burning together, turning into a mighty stream of fire flowing to the foot of the mountain. But fortunately these separate streams, except for deep pools and pools of water, formed at the foot of the mountain, and then converged into a river around the mountain, and then a small half of the creeks with dry waterbeds showed a tendency to climb the mountain, and they began to go upstream and return to the major qi palaces in the mountain. In the end, this fiery person forms a self-circulation that tends to stabilize and become orderly. The 72 waiting formations, one of the stacked formations, were also overwhelmed, and the 72 seals that were the pivot of the formation were broken one after another. The Taoist Chunyang held up a big sun with one hand, pushed it heavily, and then pressed his fingers together to make a sword art, commanding the long sword behind him. Lu Yen twisted his figure and then raised his arms, and directly dragged the rising sun to draw a huge arc, and threw it to the huge gap where the bird in the cage was crushed by the fairy. This magical power with both swordsmanship, the fire was just right, and I saw a brilliant sun rising into the sky, which evolved into a golden robe that was spread out on the way, and then a long sword rope like being implicated. Thousands of scorching suns, layer upon layer, climbed high in turn, until the sky curtain turned into pieces of robes to block the signs of expanding the gap in the wild world. In order to match the heaven position of the great sun, Zhou Xian rode the bright moon in the 2-meter formation to fall to the bottom. Lu Yen turned to look at Qin Pingon. Qin Pingon straightened his waist slightly and said in his heart, "Don't worry." The hand of Lu Yen and Zhou Xian alone is equivalent to pulling Qin Pingan's heavenly soul and earthly soul into a long straight line, like a single tree, supporting the crumbling cage. Zheng Juzhong flicked his sleeves and condensed the originally broken glass pavilion into an unknown talisman that looked like a seal, and stuck it on the door that opened in the sky. At the same time, a sunken blood groove appeared on Qin Ping's forehead. Obviously, Zheng Juzhong is the ally who doesn't care whether Qin Pingon is okay or not. Li Shixing put his fingers together, moved his steps and volleyed in the air, and drew a talisman on the ground like a talisman to fill a gap. The blood groove on Qin Ping's forehead dissipated instantly. It seems that she had been secretly instructed by Mr. Xianxia. Bai Jing hesitated for a while, glanced at the mountain master who nodded slightly, and she stepped on the virtual phase leap moon in the stacked formation, and sacrificed a sword towards the heights. Thousands of sword lights like rainbows, soaring into the sky, like countless electric lights connecting 2 seas of clouds, sword lights scurrying in the cage like lightning snakes, and at the same time in the wild world, above hundreds of miles make a thunder pool, and slowly push the bow side of the boat towards the road created by the talisman. Probably for some great monks looking up at the sky in the wild world, it is a celestial robbery who wants to ascend into the sky. Qin Pingon twisted his wrist slightly, took out the 2 talismans from his sleeves, and merged them into the backs of his left and right hands. It stands to reason that Qin Pingon can at least insist on half a stick of incense for short and 1 stick of incense for long. Xiaomo couldn't stop it, and Bai Jing also appeared in a trance for a moment. Looking at his posture, his own Qin Shanju wanted to jump over the wall in a hurry. I saw the right hand that was clenching a fist against the knee, released it gently and held the hilt of the sword with 5 fingers. The left hand, which is attached to the abdomen with the palm facing upwards, is flipped, which is also a virtual grip, but it is holding the sword edge and slowly moves from right to left. A grain of pure golden light blooms between heaven and earth. Not only did more than 700,000 long swords in the cage vibrate in unison. Even the magic sword of Daoist Chunyang, which was turned into a long rope to hold the sun, shook to a certain extent and trembled loudly if it met fellow Taoists. The wandering electric snake that Baijing Jinguang transformed into hanging between heaven and earth, like a mountain tree being blown by the wind, fell neatly to one side. Half of the great wall of sword chi with a sword in his hand. Far away in the sky, a young Taoist priest wearing a lotus crown shrank his shoulders, stretched out his palm and touched his neck. At this moment, Li Xing took the lead in squinting and looking into the distance. After a while, a slender black line winds up, and under the black line is a fiery red road. Lu Chen, who was sneakily hiding in the sky of his home to watch the excitement, suddenly widened his eyes and slapped his fists. It's better to come early than to come by chance, feast for the eyes. Seeing that the opportunity was not good, the nameless man immediately reached out and grabbed Li Jiu's shoulder beside him. Zhou Xian said solemnly, "It seems to be the ancient scorpion that wandered the depths of Taishu." Zheng Juzhong spoke with Li Xing and Mr. Xianxia. Li Xing nodded lightly. Although Mr. Xianxia had a puzzled look on his face, he still ordered the talisman woman to return to his sleeve. In the blink of an eye, this ancient serpent showed its enormous size. The whole wild world is as small as a bead, and it was swallowed by its mouth, and its head shook a little, and it knocked the stack away, and its huge body crushed the brand new road that the rune had painstakingly paved. The bead was spit out, and the head was used again, and the wild world was replaced by a new green way that seemed to be preset, and the snake figure disappeared into the void and disappeared. Just now I could vaguely see that above the snake's head, there was a Lu Fian with only skin left and no consciousness. On the road where the snake walked, the thick Dao marks burned by the fire persisted for a long time. Lu Yen shrank the mountains and rivers, walked to the side of the road in one step, crouched down, twisted a little ashes with his fingers. The Taoist real person with the Taoist name, Chunyang, couldn't help sighing, looked up into the distance. Even Dao, can it be burned? Qin Pingon fell to the ground after being hit and rolled all the way. The long sword in his left hand that was about to take shape gradually dissipated, and finally his right hand supported the ground and vomited blood. Li Shixing sighed. Today is only a temporary solution to the urgent need, and every 10 years in the future, there will be a collision between the two worlds that are pulling each other. If the ancient snake does not come to disrupt the situation, Li Xing may be able to complete his work in one battle. Of course, it may also suffer heavy casualties in the world. Just because there are too many unknown variables, any deduction is meaningless. Mr. Xianxia returned the array to Qin Pingon. The stacked formation turned into 2 flying swords, Bird in the Cage and Yuaguchi, and instantly disappeared into Qin Pingan's eyebrows. Li Xing looked as usual and bowed his thanks to everyone. You have worked hard. After all, it took 10 more years. Except for Mr. Xianxia, who remained motionless, the rest of the monks returned their salutes. And Qin Pingon wanted to stand up. Li Xing stretched out his hand and pressed it and said with a smile, "Take care of your injuries." Xiao Imo came to Qin Pingan's side and supported his son. Qin Pingon stretched out his hand to wipe off the blood on his face, but fortunately he didn't fall down again. Mr. Xianxia frowned slightly and asked in his heart, "Qin Pingon, why did you use those 2 talismans in advance?" Qin Pingon remained silent. Jingju felt regretful. If Qin Pingon resolutely slashed into the wilderness, Jingju would definitely be the first to keep up, adding fuel to the fire. Presumably that Xiao Imo and Bai Jing, the 2 Ascension Realm sword cultivators, will not be idle, and they are the icing on the cake. Li Shixing will be forced to protect Qin Pingon, and Chunyang Luyen will also use his sword to stop Bai Zhe or the Wild Sundial. Seeing the 2 sides of the confrontation, who didn't answer a question, Zhou Xian couldn't help feeling that it was nice to be young. Li Xing smiled and patted the young cultivator's arm and said, "Put yourself in the place and am not used to anyone." In a gap in Taishu that looked like a vortex of a long river of time, Li Jiao, a famously paralyzed face, couldn't help but laugh. It turned out that Anonymous was burned by an inexplicably forked fire path, and the short man who couldn't escape shook his head and tufts of charred hair fell. Li Go held back his laughter, raised his chin and asked curiously, "Who did you provoke before?" "Don't dare to call him by his first name," Anonymous said depressedly. "How is it possible? I have only seen each other a few times from a distance, and it is too late to hide. How dare I take the initiative to provoke?" In the latter part of the ancient years and before the battle to ascend to the sky, who would dare to provoke those supreme gods in the heaven except for those among the top 10 in the world? Li Xing took the lead to leave as if to chase the Taiku snake controlled by the puppet Lu Fian. Li Zixingguang asked the city lord of Baidi City, who was very relaxed from beginning to end, and asked with a smile, "Mr. Jing, it's better to hit the sun and play chess?" Jing Juzhong smiled and said, "It's better to wait until the debate between the 3 religions is over. Then I will welcome Headmaster Ko in Baidi City." The 2 sides are playing chess now. No matter how many games it is, after all, it will be impossible to win. Li Shixing nodded and said, "It's better to be respectful than to obey. The real person is mysterious with all directions, and I have never seen any traces of it." You must know that this compliment was spoken by Lu Chen himself. Zhou Xian glanced at Jing Juzhong out of the corner of his eye. The old man twitched his beard and said nothing. "It's strange, how can you 2 have personal grudges? There is only one attitude towards Jing Juzhong and Zhou Xian, and he keeps it at a distance. Just be friends, let alone enemies." Afterwards, Li Shixing walked with Mr. Xianxia and traveled back to the source along the green road where the big demon first ascended. Zhou Xian invited fellow Daoist Chunyang to go to the place where he joined the Dao for a drink. Because Zhou Xian was busy joining the road in the outer galaxy before, it was rare for Mr. Xianxia to take the initiative to show up. Therefore Zhou Xian knew a new palm story, and after thousands of years he would take it out to bask in the sun, which is the kind of old story that is talked about with great interest. The previous 5 sword cultivators of the Great Wall of Sword Qi crossed the mountains and rivers in the wild world with the 3 mountain talismans in hand. Because after Qin Pingon and the others burned incense to respect, it didn't take long for another green smoke to rise up in front of Mr. Xianxia. The second group of people, the number of people who worship the incense is not too many, only 9 people, but the incense is equally prosperous and the atmosphere is great. Taoxiai, on you. The 2 direct disciples of Jing Juzhong in Beidisheng opened the door and closed the door. Fu Su and Gu Kan Chunqing, a girl from the line of Tianqing Divine Mountain in Zhuhai Cave, a Taoist priest from Tianshifu in Longhu Mountain, a monk from Pashan Temple in Zhongtu, Su Bai who was born in the line of the ancestral family of the military family. In short, Confucianism, Taoism and militarism, the three religions have all. In such a short period of time, there have been two groups of people holding the three mountain talismans across the mountains and rivers to return the salute, and they are still very young, not ordinary young people. So even Mr. Xianxia was a little surprised, and there was a rare smile on his face. Unlike many great monks, what he values is the future and the future of others. If we talk about the past, the prosperous years, after all, are the old yellow calendar. In the future there are infinite possibilities. Like a book, it always takes a plot twist that surprises the viewer. And the content that has been thoroughly familiar in the front, no matter how amazing people and things are, at most you can go back and read it a few times, but memories and nostalgia are easy to make people in the book feel sad. Some things can be said or not. At that time, Zhou Xian and Qin Pingan, a young man, actually had no friendship at all. Just because in the Jinjiazi battlefield, Qin Pingan's pioneering disciple Zhou Xian, the little girl who is resolute in her work and treats people with sincerity, impressed the old real person very well, and by the way, she went to the young hidden official who had never been masked. The look and feel is good. What kind of master brings out what kind of apprentice? That's why Yu Shenkai said with a very meaningful smile that he had to pay tribute to the incense twice, thanks to that fellow Chen Xiaodao. At that time the young cultivator hesitated for a while but nodded. It is a reluctance to agree with Yu Xian's statement. It's not that this Mr. 3 Mountains in 9 hours thinks too much of himself and is stingy with good words, but because Yu Xian told him a heartfelt word before. Therefore his nodding was equivalent to being forced to give an answer. It turned out that Yu Xian had asked about it before. Was it because Zhilan was in power and had to get rid of it? After that, in order to mend the land shortage of Tongye continent, Qin Pingan borrowed landscapes from the princes, as if, I am the host. The nod of Mr. Xianxia in the outer Xinghe, Qin Pingan is equal to a legitimate will, just like a local official who is a senior official in the frontier, gets an official document issued by the court and does things logically. Of course, Mr. Xianxia didn't nod and Qin Pingan could still make up for the lack of ground, but the final effect would not be so good. This kind of opportunity to enjoy the scenery outside is really rare, so Qin Pingan took Xiaomo and Beijing back to Hauran slowly. And Qin Pingan's heart that has not been recovered, saw a scene after going against the current with the sword holder for thousands of years. Let Qin Pingan go for a long time and be dazed. The setting sun melts gold and the twilight clouds blend together. On a mountaintop the night was dark and there was a bonfire around. In addition to the world's top 10 and 4 candidates, there are many figures.